Chapter 731. Gains illusory black threads emanated out of Señor's body and entered Klein's hands. With every jolt in spirituality, it gave a different reaction. In fact, there was no need to use both hands when controlling the spirit-body threads. Klein was just accustomed to doing so, as it gave him a feeling like he was truly controlling a puppet. From the looks of it, other marionettists can discover each other's marionettes. The Señor's abnormality can't be hidden from their eyes, so I have to be careful about this. Klein concluded the problems he discovered, and he quickly turned his thoughts back onto Señor. This Admiral of Blood was dead. His spirit body had become a vessel for the marionette, losing any traits that belonged to him. Therefore, many divination methods were ineffective against him. Of course, methods to seek his corpse were still effective. Klein planned on cleansing the wraith in the gray fog before using paper angels to envelop the mirror-like objects that he had possessed before placing him into a cigar case that was sealed by a wall of spirituality, along with Azek's copper whistle. This created a three-layered interference effect. This way, Klein believed that, even if the Rose School of Thought Angel wished to, it was impossible to use divination to lock onto his position via Admiral of Blood. As for whether the Mother Tree of Desire had left any backdoors in Señor's body, he wasn't too worried. This was because if that really happened, she could have mutated Señor during the Demigod Battle Royale in order to deal with him. Based on the situation back then, there was a guaranteed chance of success. Mother Tree of Desire, or should I say, the Chain God, strictly controls its organization's members. It relies on a vow contract and other methods that are ingrained into the soul. This can be inferred from Miss Sharon's descriptions and my interaction with the corresponding characteristics. As long as I don't attempt to use Admiral of Blood to divine the secrets of the Rose School of Thought, or the potion formula of the mutant pathway, I wouldn't trigger any problems. The werewolf beyonder characteristic has remained normal despite being above the gray fog for so long. Besides, there's still the gray fog cleansing process. If there are any latent problems, it should be washed out. Klein thought for a while, and took out Azek's copper whistle from inside his body. He turned his right wrist, and made the side with fewer patterns appear under the sunlight, making it reflect the light. Immediately, the copper whistle had Señor's figure appear on it, as it rapidly turned clear. The Admiral of Blood in front of Klein suddenly vanished as a result. Perhaps the Mother Tree of Desire can use the vow contract and other methods to vaguely lock on. But that doesn't matter. She can sense the gray fog's unique trait on me anyway, and she will sense me once I'm within range. Besides, this marionette might be destroyed at any time when I use it as a shield. Klein was like a jobless tramp who was debt-laden. He felt that there was almost nothing he was afraid of. Of course, he really was debt-ridden. As long as I advance to a demigod and can hide my unique trait, it's fine losing marionettes. Klein surveyed the area as he bent his back to pick up the silver necklace. He took 4 steps counterclockwise while chanting the incantation softly. This time, he hadn't entered via summoning his spirit body, so he couldn't directly return. The grayish-white fog was quickly emanated as hysterical ravings, and roars echoed for an eternity. Azek's copper whistle didn't react abnormally, which meant that there weren't any latent problems with Admiral of Blood. Sitting at the end of the bronze table, Klein placed Azek's copper whistle in front of him, making Señor, who was dressed in a dark red coat and old triangular hat, appear. He was like a butler awaiting orders from his master. "Do you have any other items on you?" Klein asked, as though Admiral of Blood was still alive. This was his attempt to act as a marionettist. Following that, he controlled Señor, made him rummage through every pocket as he subsequently took out 325 pounds, 16 soldi, and 8 pence in cash. There were also 13 gold coins. Apart from that, perhaps due to his frequent act of transforming into a wraith state, Señor didn't carry anything else on him. How poor. As a pirate admiral, you don't even have a single mystical item? Did you hand it over to the Rose School of Thought, or your subordinates? Klein seriously considered cashing out Admiral of Blood via the black market. Just in loan alone, he was worth 42,000 pounds. Yes, claiming the bounty from loan isn't pragmatic. Be it the Church of Storms and the Kingdom's military, They will follow the clues to capture Gehrman Sparrow, who managed to embroil so many demigods in a battle royale, and then investigate the organization backing him. They wouldn't even pay, and they might even plant a trap. By the same logic, the churches and governments of other countries must have similar ideas. However, they might be easier to work with. Retrieving the bounty will require substantial risks. Besides, there's no rush. I'll send Senior out when I plan on switching marionettes. After all, being a marionette for a few days won't change his identity or value. Klein reined in his thoughts and cast his gaze on the silver necklace with an ancient coin attached to it. He immediately used divination to gain the gist of its origins and usage. It came from a Sequence 5 winner from the Life School of Thought. After dying at the hands of a Rose School of Thought demigod, this gentleman's beyonder characteristic and psyche fused with an ordinary silver necklace that he carried with him, turning into a mystical item. As for the reason why the ordinary silver necklace would be carried by a Sequence 5 powerhouse for extended periods of time, Klein was unable to receive any effective revelations from it, as it had been too long and it had been corrupted. The mystical item had two uses. One was to passively make the wearer lucky. In their daily lifestyle, the owner would encounter good things, easily succeeding in whatever they did. When suffering a lethal blow or terrifying disaster, ridiculous scenes would happen, allowing them to be successfully rescued. The latter situation only lasted for 10 minutes. The second use was to actively give an enemy bad luck, making the target unlucky. Be it in daily life or combat, it was easy for them to experience failure due to some trivial problem. The corresponding negative effects of the necklace was the conservation of luck. After being lucky, they would immediately meet with repeated bad luck. They would be as unlucky as they were lucky before. It needed the wearer to be devoted and seriously avoid any danger. Otherwise, it was very easy for them to die in a comedic manner, and even harm people around them. The luck received in one's daily life would often revert back after a month. The user would end up unlucky regardless of whether they wore it or not. However, such bad luck was slowly released, so it wasn't too dangerous. And luck obtained in combat would similarly strike back 10 minutes later in a similar vigor. Overall, this is a rather good mystical item, but I don't have much use for it. After all, Fate Counselor Ricardo was unable to change my luck. I'll just wear it on me for now. It has few negative effects on me. I'll sell it if there's a chance to pay off my debt with Miss Messenger. Miss Messenger wants gold coins, while I have gold pounds. It's nearly impossible to exchange 10,000 gold coins through the banks or official markets. From the looks of it, I'll have to do it in batches, getting each Tarot Club member to change some of it. Klein soon decided on a plan, as he casually came up with a name for the necklace. Scales of Luck. Following that, he cast his gaze onto Senor, who was standing reverently to his side. He began to study the powers a wraith had: forceful possession, enemy control, wraith's shriek, mirror blink, obstacle penetration, death-related spells, and invisibility that wouldn't be discovered by most mid and low sequence beyonders. Klein distinguished each power, and he matched them with Sharon's and Merrick's description, as well as his experience gained from combat. He soon concluded this, afraid that the candle in the outside world would finish burning, and a dark cave was extremely bad for the present him, who had a phobia of the dark. Klein immediately took out a paper figurine from the junk pile, and together with the Black Emperor card, he stirred some of the powers above the gray fog, turning it into an anti-divination angel. This angel rapidly spread its wings and wrapped around a gold coin. On its reflective side was Signor's figure. Then Klein brought the gold coin, Azek's copper whistle, death knell, and his suitcase back to the real world. As for Creeping Hunger and Grozel's travels, one of them hadn't been fed, and the other might cause Klein to be swallowed into the book for carrying it for too long. Therefore, they were left in the junk pile above the gray fog. Having returned to the cave, Klein hurriedly placed the gold coin and Azek's copper whistle into a cigar case before sealing it with a wall of spirituality. He cleaned up the scene, switched into formal clothes, and carried his suitcase. He followed the beach until he came to a residential area. He discovered that he was near Pritz Harbor. He didn't immediately return to Backlund. Instead, he changed his appearance, took a steam locomotive, and headed for Conant City in Desi Bay. He planned on circling the area once before changing his identity again. Bancy Harbor. Alger Wilson looked at the destroyed city under the afternoon sun. He saw that the buildings had completely collapsed, and there were deep chasms in the ground and charred spots everywhere. Such a scene extended into the depths of the island. Even the mountain had collapsed. At that moment, there wasn't anyone from the Church of Storms watching the ruins, since there wasn't anything here. And the plans to rebuild the harbor wasn't brought forward at all. Alger jumped off the Blue Avenger and circled the ruins with his sailors. But they didn't discover anything of value. "Let's go," he instructed with a staid attitude. He soon boarded the ship which hoisted its sails and left the island. After an unknown period of time, a figure suddenly walked out from the depths of the ruins. He wore a double-breasted pure black clerical robe. He had dark golden hair, and his facial features were clear and distinct, like an ancient classical sculpture. His eyes were dark blue nearing black. They looked lusterless, but they were filled with dense blood capillaries. Chapter 732. Destination Desi County, Conant City, 67, Red Indus Street. Wearing a commonly seen face in the Lone Kingdom, Klein took a step forward and rang the doorbell. In less than a minute, the door creaked open as a maidservant looked out and asked out of curiosity, "Good evening. Who might you be looking for?" "I'm here to find Ma'am Nilu. I'm a friend of her father, Davy Raymond," Klein answered calmly. Derek Raymond was the nightmare who he had released from creeping hunger. It was a red glove from the Nighthawks, and the first thing on his mind before he dissipated was his daughter, Nilu Raymond. He was very apologetic towards her for not spending time with her while she grew up, making her effectively lose her father when she had already lost her mother. Klein had promised him that he would make a visit to the beautiful coastal city if he had the chance to visit his daughter. Having probed for more information earlier, Klein had gained a general idea about Nilu Raymond's situation. After this girl graduated from grammar school, she worked at the Women and Children Care Foundation, which was run by the Church of the Evernight Goddess. She had a weekly salary of £2.10 solely, and was the target of envy by her neighbors. She also inherited an inheritance from her businessman father. As for how much it was, no one knew. They just knew that she was richer than most people from the middle class. Typically speaking, women with such wealth would place great emphasis on their marriage. They would repeatedly select and observe candidates, resulting in their late marriage. However, Nilu had married to a civil servant just a year later. As both parties were believers of the Evernight Goddess, she didn't take on her husband's last name. She continued going by the name Nilu Raymond, and she continued staying at 67, Red Indus Street. After hearing Klein's answer, the maidservant quickly requested him to wait as she entered the living room to report to her mistress. Before long, a woman in a home dress walked to the door. She had black hair and blue eyes. Her face was rather thin, and she was rather pretty. She resembled Davy Raymond. "Good evening, sir. I'm Nilu, Davy Raymond's daughter. May I know when you got to know my father?" Nilu Raymond asked politely but warily. Klein took off his hat and smiled. "I got to know him at sea. It's been several years." Nilu Raymond swept him with a wary gaze and said, "Perhaps you might not know, but he has already passed away." Klein sighed and replied, "Yes, I know. I got to know him through that disaster. He had some words to say back then which I didn't think too much about. However, the more I thought about it in recent years, the more I felt that I should inform you." "Is that so?" Nilu said softly. After some thought, she invited him. "Please come in. Would you mind if my husband listens in?" "This is up to you to decide," Klein frankly replied. Nilu nodded and led Klein into the study. Her husband had the looks of an ordinary civil servant with a gentleman's bearing. He put down his newspapers and followed them in. After both parties sat down, Klein looked at the couple on the sofa and deliberated. Mr. Davy Raymond once experienced disaster after another. He lost his father, mother, wife, brothers, and sisters. Nilu nodded with a deadpan expression. "I know," Klein thought and continued. "He appears to be a merchant, but he was in fact seeking out the murderers who caused that disaster." "I know," Neela didn't object to it. Klein glanced at her and continued. He dedicated himself to this matter, and he was very regretful that he didn't manage to spend time with you growing up, making you lose your father alongside your mother. Neela fell silent for a second before she rapidly replied, I know. Klein swept his gaze to the old books around him and sighed silently. He said that his greatest wish was to see you enter the hall of marriage under the witness of the goddess, to have your own family, and to not be lonely anymore. I believe he should be very happy right now. Neela's gaze slowly moved away from Klein's face as she turned Agape, answering only 2 seconds later. I know. Klein leaned forward slightly as he clasped his hands. He said that he might die at sea, and he wanted me to tell you that he died as a result of an accident. All the murderers from before have already been punished. You do not need to hate anyone. He also said that he loves you very much, and that he's very sorry. Neelu remained silent for a few seconds as she blinked. She turned her head to the side and scoffed with an unclear attitude. Got it. Klein gave her a deep look before getting up. I'm done passing on the message. It's time I leave. Met with silence, Neela's husband nodded gently as a gesture of thanks. Klein turned around, walked to the door of the study. Just as he twisted the doorknob, Neelu Raymond's voice sounded from behind him, deep and hoarse. What kind of person do you think he was? Klein fell silent for a second, turned his head, and curled his lips. He said with a smile, a guardian. He didn't stay any longer as he opened the door and walked to the coat rack. When he wore his hat and left 67, reddened a street soft, restrained sobbing suddenly drilled into his ears. Shaking his head silently, Klein left the burrow and entered a cathedral of the Evernight goddess. Passing through the dark and serene aisle, he sat in the 7th row from the back. He faced the crimson half-moon and the black sacred emblem filled with resplendent stars. He took off his hat, lowered his head, and held his hands to his mouth, just like the many believers present. While praying silently in the silence and tranquility, time quickly passed. Klein slowly opened his eyes as he gently stood up. At the spot where he sat, he left behind an item wrapped in paper. Klein walked along the aisle and left the prayer hall, going straight to the cathedral's entrance. With his back facing the hall, he wore his hat, raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. Pa! The paper suddenly ignited where he sat, garnering the priest's attention. When this gentleman rushed over, the flames had already extinguished, leaving behind a dark gem-like item. Although the priest didn't know what the item was, his spiritual perception told him that it was very important. When he and the other priests rushed outside the cathedral, the gentleman in a tailcoat and half-top hat had already disappeared. The next morning, through a local black market, Klein had obtained a new identity as he came to the steam locomotive station. In his hand was a second-class ticket worth 18 soldi, as well as identification documents for himself. He held a black leather suitcase as he stood at the platform with his back straight, awaiting the arrival of the train headed for Backlund. The present him was a middle-aged man who was nearing his 40s. He was slightly more than 180 centimeters tall, and his black hair had a few silver strands. His deep blue eyes were like a lake at night, and he was rather good-looking. He gave off mature and elegant vibes. Looking down at the identification documents, Klein's eyes reflected his present name, Dwayne Dantes. After some thought, he placed the suitcase on the ground, laid it down, and opened it before stuffing all his identification documents inside. Inside the suitcase, there was a black wooden box containing the former lone soldier, Frunzier Edwards' ashes. Moments after arranging his suitcase, he heard a whistle. A steam train chugged into the station spewing smoke before it slowed down to a halt. He looked up and cast his gaze forward as he examined it in silence. Then he looked down at his suitcase and whispered, "It's time to return." He then stood straight, carried his belongings, and walked to the open carriage door. Backlund, Sherwood Backlund, 26 Gunstead Street. Benson took off his hat, removed his coat, and handed it to the maidservant. He looked at his sister, Melissa, who was glued to her book in the living room. The entrance examinations are in June. You'll finally experience the pain of studiously studying that I endured back then. Melissa didn't look up as she continued reading. I'm studiously studying every day. A little humor, Melissa. A little humor. What's the difference between a person without humor and a curly-haired baboon? Benson said with a smile. Melissa casually glanced at him and said, That wasn't what you said in the past. She didn't correct him on what the exact difference was between humans and curly-haired baboons. And she instead said, Do civil servants also finish work so late? No, there's been a lot of work recently. As you know, you don't. In such a huge reform, the handing over of work and the straightening out of different relationships are very troublesome. Benson swept the mirror in the living room. He couldn't help but lift his hand to comb his hair, as he said with a look of displeasure. Although I'm only a low-ranking employee in the Ministry of Finance, that doesn't stop me from having plenty of work. The only thing to be happy about it, that I finally survived the darn probationary period. I'll soon have a weekly salary of £3. Melissa put down her book, and she walked to the dining hall and said to Benson, It's dinner time. She paused and said very seriously, I read in the papers that there's something called Donningsman tree sap that has a significant effect on boosting hair growth. Benson's face immediately had mixed expressions. Whoosh! Amidst the whistle, the long steam locomotive chugged into Backlund. Klein picked up his suitcase and once again stepped into the capital of capitals, the land of hope. He discovered that the smog had thinned significantly, and there wasn't the obvious palish yellow colors. The gas street lamps on the platform were already turned on, dispersing the gloominess and darkness. Surveying the area, Klein walked out the steam locomotive station, took the metro in a carriage, and came to a Church of Storms cemetery outside Westboro. Then he spent a little bit of money and placed Frunzier Edwards' ashes into a partition. By then, this lone soldier had already left Backlund for more than 165 years. After taking a step back, Klein observed it for a moment before using a pen and paper to engrave something on the partition door. Frunzier Edward. He closed his eyes and added, Every journey has its destination. Chapter 733. The return. Under a persistent rain, mingled with the thin fog, the rows of street lamps tried their hardest to shine through the mist. The occasional horse carriage that proceeded down the streets was a common evening sight in Backlund. Apart from these, Klein noticed a few gratifying changes while standing behind the window. Ring! A crisp sound echoed in the air as a two-wheeled mechanical device rushed down the side of the street to the other end of the street. Its frame was black in color, with some parts revealing grayish-white steel. Under the illumination of the street lamps and rain, it sparkled with the beauty of metal. On this device sat a man dressed in a postman's uniform. He kept pedaling with his legs, apparently using a great deal of strength. Behind him was a wooden box that had been painted in green. It's been promoted very well. The white shirt, black-vested, mature-looking Klein sighed inwardly when he saw this scene. In a few hours within his return to Backlund, he noticed many similar mechanical devices, and they were none other than the bicycles that he had promoted and invested in. From the newspapers, Klein knew that the Backlund Bike Company had done tons of advertisements. It even held a bicycle competition in boroughs like Cherwood and Backlund Bridge, so as to garner the attention of others. Apart from that, they also actively promoted it to the government departments such as the Postal Service and the police departments. The results were said to be pretty good. Their pricing strategy had followed Klein's original suggestion, avoiding the middle-upper class who often used horse carriages. Instead, they aimed their target audience at those with weekly salaries of £1.10 solely and above, such as technical workers, students with a decent family background, and clerical employees that often needed to travel outside. Therefore, a bike worth £3 to £5 was affordable for the people in this demographic, if they bit the bullet a little. And at the same time, they could flaunt it to the masses who had incomes that were lower than them. The current issue is that Backlund often rains. It's difficult to hold an umbrella while riding a bicycle. The next step should be a raincoat. Klein retracted his gaze, shook his head and chuckled. The place he stayed at was a high-end hotel in the Hillston borough. It cost him 10 solely a night, making him feel quite the pinch. However, to match his persona, All he could do was bite the bullet and put up with it. His idea of Dwayne Dantes was that he was a believer of the Evernight goddess and a mysterious tycoon that came from Desi Bay. He had sold his original land and mines, planning to seek out brand new opportunities in Backland. He had a certain level of interest in obtaining an aristocratic title, but he didn't have the abundant wealth to do so. He had to first expand his social circle and begin making some investments. The benefits of this identity was that it was clearly different from the characters Klein had previously acted as. It allowed him to very naturally interact with people from the middle-upper class, especially members of the Military Officers Club and the Backland Diocese bishops of the Church of the Evernight Goddess. It made it convenient for Klein to continue his investigations into the Great Smog of Backland while gathering intel before he made detailed plans to steal the Antigonus family's notebook. There were obvious disadvantages as well. Such a mysterious tycoon would definitely catch the notice of the Nighthawks and mandated punishers, so there was a certain level of background checks that he would have to undergo. According to Klein's experience, such an investigation would be done by the official Beyonder organizations under the premise that nothing important had happened. It could also be handed over to the police department, but in summary, not too much effort would be put into it, as it would be considered a routine check. Therefore, Klein, who was considered quite an expert at disguises, had prepared a second layer to his identity as Dwayne Dantes to his designs, so as to deal with the background inspection. This second layer to his identity was that Dwayne Dantes was a person who had adventured in the southern continent's East and West Balam for some particular reason. He had used a nickname, and he spent more than 10 years in that rather dangerous land filled with opportunity in order to amass a great deal of wealth. Since the origin of his wealth wasn't overboard, he had secretly returned to Desi Bay, and he forged a new identity. He had planned on beginning a new life in Backland and gradually legalize his wealth. It wasn't rare to see such people in Lone. Their stories were acceptable and imaginable for an investigation. For this identity layer, Klein had left some inconspicuous clues in Conant City, so as to indirectly reveal the truth. These clues included, but were not limited to, the stubs of his scalped tickets from East Balam to Conant City, habits as a result of living in the southern continent for extended periods of time, as well as his wealth of unknown origins. Klein believed that as long as Dwayne Dantes didn't involve himself in any serious Beyonder matters, preparations such as this were enough to fool most routine background inspections. And if he encountered an extremely dedicated official Beyonder, who investigated it all the way, and was even willing to seek the help of colleagues from the southern continent, then Dwayne Dantes had a third identity layer. It was that he was a cheat who had anti-divination measures to a certain degree. He disguised himself as a mysterious tycoon and spent large amounts of money in investments for this final scam. This identity was enough to get Dwayne Dantes arrested, but the level of attention placed on him wouldn't be too great. This allowed Klein to exit the stage without much trouble. Compared to my first time in Backland, the creation of a three-layered identity shows how I've really matured significantly. Klein slowly walked to the middle of the room as he cast his gaze on a full-body mirror in the corner. His reflection had black hair and some strands of gray hair. His eyes were deep, but his experiences had left indelible marks on his face. He was a charming middle-aged man with a mature bearing. The design of Dwayne Dantes' identity wasn't difficult for the present Klein. However, stealing the Antigonus family's notebook from behind St. Samuel Cathedral's Cheney's Gate was practically an impossible task for any external Beyonder. Even a king of angels couldn't guarantee success. Of course, unlike other Beyonders, Klein had two advantages. First, he was once a Nighthawk. He had quite a good understanding of the internal procedures they followed, and he knew which matters he could exploit. Therefore, the first solution he eliminated was to become a particular Nighthawk, infiltrate it, and find a chance to pass through Cheney's Gate. There was a problem that existed in this. Nighthawks weren't able to randomly enter Cheney's Gate, even for the captains and deacons. Something had to happen first before they received the corresponding authority. Furthermore, Cheney's Gate had its keepers inside. Randomly entering or taking things would result in an attack on him, causing a battle to break out. Klein didn't wish for his theft to result in any deaths or injury to the members of the Church of the Goddess. After careful consideration, he placed his sights on the keepers. These elders were retired Nighthawks who volunteered to enter Cheney's Gate. They were in charge of watching the sealed artifacts, and they were from a different department from the Nighthawks. They entered and exited using the underground passageway through the cathedral, and they never interfered with the Nighthawks' work, nor would they be disturbed by the Nighthawks. Perhaps a result of staying behind Cheney's Gate for extended periods of time, these keepers all had certain traits. They had cold auras and had deadpan expressions. Their skin was pale, and they resembled monsters from the deep darkness who were on the border of life and death. Klein believed that it wasn't difficult for him to locate his target if he met one. His initial plan was to rent a place in North Borough near St. Samuel Cathedral. He would hire a butler, a valet, a maidservant, a gardener, a chef, and a carriage driver to have a front as a tycoon. Then, he would often head to the cathedral to pray piously, participate in mass, donate money, and familiarize himself with the bishops and priests. During this process, he would work hard to find suspected keepers. He would choose 2 or 3 targets and observe their habits. When the opportunity arises, he would imprison one of them, change into his appearance or directly possess him, pass through Cheney's Gate, and attempt to flip through or take the Antigonus family's notebook away. This was a very crude plan that was merely a train of thought. It needed to be perfected according to the intelligence Klein would slowly acquire. For this matter, Klein's second advantage was the Tarot Club. He had assistants that the Church of the Evernight Goddess and the Nighthawks would never think of. Furthermore, he could consider extending the recruitment of a Backlund Diocese Nighthawk or Keeper into the gathering. He could then complete the theft through this traitor, just like how Emperor Roselle was used to obtain the Antigonus family's notebook by Zeratul. I've got to frequently head to the cathedral. Only by doing so can I find a target. Klein faced the mirror as he silently nodded. It had to be said that he felt conflicted. If a true Nighthawk or Keeper were to betray the church to serve Mr. Fool, his first thought was to unleash divine punishment to get rid of this despicable traitor. After exhaling, he gave a self-deprecating laugh. He wore his double-breasted frock coat and hat, walked out the room, and reached the streets. With an umbrella, he circled to another street. Taking advantage of the distant street lamp and the drizzle, he suddenly changed back into Sherlock Moriarty. Glancing at his wrinkled trousers, Klein stopped a carriage and planned on heading to Isengard Stanton's house in Hillston Borough. Half an hour later, the somewhat ancient and dark building appeared before Klein's eyes. He paid 2 soldi for his ride as he walked steadily around the puddles amidst the drizzle that refracted the yellowish light of dusk, before coming to the famous detective's doorstep. Putting away his umbrella, he reached out to ring the doorbell and waited for a moment before seeing a man with a wide face open the door. The man had a head of malt-colored hair, grayish-blue eyes, and high cheekbones. He had the traits of someone from Lemberg or Mason. Mr. Isengard Stanton's new assistant? Someone from the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom? Klein took off his hat and said with a smile, "Good evening. Is Mr. Isengard Stanton home?" "He is. He just had his dinner after a busy day at work," the malt-colored lad replied politely. "May I know who you are?" Klein chortled and said, "Tell the good detective that a friend of his has returned from his vacation." The young man was taken aback as he blurted out, "Mr. Sherlock Moriarty." Chapter 734. Old friends, you actually know me? This means that Mr. Isengard Stanton often mentions me as a friend. Or does it mean that the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom knows that I was embroiled in the great smog of Backlund? Klein smiled as he nodded in an unperturbed manner. "Yes, I'm Sherlock Moriarty." The grayish-blue-eyed lad immediately gave way as he warmly gestured him in. "Mr. Stanton has been worried about you all this time. He was afraid that you met with trouble. He can now be at peace." Klein handed him his umbrella as he took off his hat and coat while walking in. At this moment, Isengard Stanton, who had sensed something, had put down his papers and pipe, and he left his reclining chair to take a look. Oh my Sherlock, you're finally back. It's been so long, my friend. The thin Isengard with grayed sides revealed a smile as he came over with welcoming arms in an attempt to give him a greeting hug. Klein wasn't used to such a custom, so he forced himself to reciprocate it and smile. Mr. Stanton, this isn't something a believer of wisdom would do. The bishops and priests of the god of knowledge and wisdom had their pride, and they seldom gave greeting hugs. But in fact, apart from the boorish Fasak Empire and the liberal Intis Kingdom, such a manner of etiquette was rare in other countries and regions. It only happened among very familiar friends. Isengard took 2 steps back and chuckled. No, Sherlock. We're never stingy with respect and friendliness towards intelligent friends. In my heart, you're one of the top 5 detectives in all of Backland. I like that. Klein smiled inwardly as he retorted in jest. So you're one of the top 3 detectives? To be praised as having true wisdom by a sequence 7 believer of the god of knowledge and wisdom was really delighting. I wish that you share the same thoughts as myself, Isengard skillfully and gently replied. Then he invited him to the living room and to the sofa. He leaned into a reclining chair and picked up his pipe. With a deep breath he exhaled. I'm very happy that nothing bad happened to you. You seem especially fine both in body and mind. How was it? Was Desibay fun? Klein had already prepared an excuse as he calmly smiled. In fact, I didn't go to Desibay. I ended up going to Constant. Haha. I was previously embroiled in some trouble in Backland, so I could only find a place to hide. Sherlock Moriarty was a gentleman from Mid-Seashire, who had a slight accent. It was a very normal choice to return to his hometown after causing trouble. Constant was Mid-Seashire's capital. I know, Isengard replied heavily. He didn't inquire about the trouble which Sherlock had involved himself in. Instead, he said with a smile, in short, welcome back to Backland. Come to me if you need any help. Klein didn't stand on ceremony as he immediately said, the purpose of my visit was first because it really has been a while since we last met, and second, I wish that you can sell my shares in the Backland Bike Company on my behalf. Haha, all the documents are in place, and there's no need to carry out any other procedures. In order to act as a mysterious tycoon, and to repay Miss Messenger with the 10,000 gold coins, not only did he plan on selling items he had little use for, but he also planned on letting go of the last 10% of his shares in the Backland Bike Company. After all, Sherlock Moriarty wasn't able to appear in a legitimate fashion for a long period of time. Are you really going to sell it? Isengard stroked his pipe and said, although I've never been a businessman, I can tell that the bike is a product that's of great value and something that can be promoted on a large scale. Its commercial future is like the newly risen sun, and it has yet to reach its limits. You'll be losing plenty of money by selling it now. That's why a buyer will be very willing to raise the price significantly because of this expected value. Klein chuckled. I believe the people who can tell the value of the bike and its future aren't in the minority, and Frames and Leopard are definitely unwilling to reduce any part of their holdings at this stage. There shouldn't be a problem selling my 10% shares at twice or thrice the normal price. Isengard, the pricing of shares isn't about the present, but about its future. To illustrate an alluring story for the buyer and investor, and drawing a beautiful future is very necessary. Of course, the value and future of the bike don't require additional input from me. Anyone with any business sense can tell. The only problem stems in the rubber production. Klein silently added inwardly. The pricing of shares isn't about the present, but about its future. Isengard softly repeated Klein's words, and after a moment he sincerely sighed. Sherlock, perhaps you should be involved in the business world. However, there will always be many accidents present. To dare to take risks is equivalent to chivalry in business. Oh well, I admit that I've recently been in dire need of large sums of cash, Klein replied with a smile. Isengard picked up his pipe as he gave it a satisfactory suck. You've convinced me. I will specially hire a lawyer and accountant to confirm the market value of Backland Bike Company. Then, I'll add on an estimate of the expected profits and sell that 10% of yours. The corresponding fees and taxes will be deducted from the amount received. Oh, how should I contact you? It seems like your rental contract for the house at Minsk Street has lapsed. Klein obviously wouldn't expose his present identity. He said, having prepared for it. You can post news on the Tussock Times, Backlund Daily Tribune, and other newspapers about the sale of the shares to make more people know. Only when there's competition would there be better price negotiations. When it's sold, you can publish a notice to indicate that the deal has been closed and that further inquiries won't be entertained. And when I see that notice, I'll come visit you. Isengard was no stranger when it came to communicating over published notices in the newspapers. He nodded and said, "No problem. Of course. All expenses will be deducted from the final sum received." With his main goal accomplished, Klein stood up and reached out his hand. "Thank you for your help, Isengard. I need to leave. We can talk in the future." Isengard didn't hold him back, as he sent him straight out the door. Klein circled to a nearby street and took a carriage to the Braveheart's Bar, as he admired Braveheart's Bar's night view in the drizzle. He planned on re-establishing all the news and resource channels which Sherlock Moriarty used to have. After entering the noisy bar, he didn't head for the bar counter to order some beer and make inquiries. Instead, he circled around the boxing ring in preparation to leave, so that he could wait for Miss Sharon to appear on the carriage outside. At this moment, the door to a billiard room creaked open. Ian, with an old coat, walked out with newspapers in hand. His red eyes did a cursory sweep when he suddenly noticed a familiar figure. He gaped his mouth, but he didn't say his name. He greeted in pleasant surprise. "Good evening, sir. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Not for now. I'm only here to visit an old friend." Klein smiled warmly. As he spoke, he noticed that the papers in Ian's hand was news at sea. On it was a striking headline. "Shocking. Crazy adventurer made a fugitive." Crazy adventurer. Klein intuitively believed that it had nothing to do with him. Ian noticed his gaze and raised the newspapers with a smile. "This is one of the rare up-to-date reports from News at Sea, because the bounties have already appeared in various places. The crazy adventurer Gehrman Sparrow plotted to bring harm on the City of Generosity, and he has been proven to be a member of a cult. In this incident, thanks to the Church of Storms and the military, no one from Byam was injured. But Admiral of Blood Senior, who was involved in the matter, vanished as a result. It's suspected that he has been killed by Gehrman Sparrow. Guess how much of a bounty they are offering for Gehrman Sparrow? £50,000. It has exceeded Admiral of Blood's, and it's almost reached that of Admiral Hell's. £50,000. Klein's heart stirred. He calmed the palpitations in his heart as he replied with a smile. Unfortunately, few people can claim such a bounty. He pointed at the bar's entrance and said, "I'll come to look for you again when I have the time." "All right." Ian didn't ask further as he mentioned in passing. "Is Mr. White from the Harvest Church your friend? That fellow, Emlyn, is finally willing to get out of the house." For those primordial moon believers? Klein nodded. "That's right." After saying that, he squeezed through the crowd and pushed open the door to leave the Braveheart's Bar. After getting onto a rental carriage, Klein cast his gaze outside, awaiting Miss Sharon's appearance. Of course, he wasn't certain that she was here. Months had passed, so it was very possible that this lady and Merrick had switched their area of activity. Silently, Klein's spiritual perception was triggered as he turned to look at the window. On the glass which could reflect the night view, a young lady in a black bonnet and Gothic-styled black dress clearly appeared. Turning his head, Klein saw Miss Sharon sitting opposite him. Her pale blonde hair, blue eyes and pale expression didn't seem any different from before. "Good evening." Klein, who no longer needed to act as Gehrman Sparrow, greeted first. Sharon got up a little and curtsied. Realizing that she might have read News at Sea, he was momentarily unable to find a topic for small talk. He cleared his throat and directly said, "I killed Senor." "Okay." Sharon nodded slightly, indicating that she was aware. Klein smiled as he continued. "If Merrick still needs the beyonder characteristic of a wraith, he can wait and prepare the money needed. Once I find a replacement, I'll sell Senor to him." Sharon didn't ask what replacement meant as she replied, "After seeing that piece of news, he has been awaiting your return." "Very good." Klein chuckled. He reached out for his collar, pulled out a silver necklace and said, "Señor's lucky item. You should know about it, right?" Sharon tersely answered as she waited for Klein to continue. "I plan to sell either this, or the biological poison bottle. Would you, or people from your circle, be interested?" Klein took the initiative to ask. Chapter 735. Another visit. Sharon was silent for 2 seconds before she said, "I'll help ask." "It means you need to consider it?" "That's right. The negative effects of scales of luck does leave one hesitant. However, biological poison bottle is really compatible with a wraith. If it wasn't because I'm short on money, and how it lowers my immunity, making me easily fall sick, I wouldn't be willing to sell it. It's rather effective in an ambush." Klein vaguely grasped Sharon's intentions as he stuffed the silver necklace back into his collar. He asked after some thought, "Which power of a high-sequence prisoner pathway beyonder makes all surrounding lifeless items attack one's target?" "Puppet," Sharon succinctly replied. "It's the power of a sequence 4 puppet, turning themselves into a lifeless puppet, so that they are able to control all lifeless objects in a certain range. Advancing further, will they be able to directly influence the mystical items of an enemy?" Klein nodded in enlightenment and asked, "Then, do you know that demigod?" He immediately described in detail the appearance of the elder, who had attacked him outside by him. "Shanks," Sharon calmly said a name. "I actually wished that you could share with me more about him." Klein knew Miss Sharon's style as he said with an exasperated smile, "Then, do you know Zatwin? He was the mentor of the Naturism sect's leader in Orvie Island." "The demigod who was pursuing us," Sharon answered without hiding anything or any emotions like a doll. "That's the one who made me feel like the chairs, tables, and curtains wished to kill me. What a coincidence. However, it wasn't arranged. It just proves that as a secret organization, the Rose School of Thought, with a history of over 1,000 years, doesn't have that many demigods. Perhaps it has about the same number as the Aurora Order. The number of saints number around 5, and the number of angels and grade 0 sealed artifacts number about 2 to 3. Of course, this is also because they were suppressed by the 7 major churches, reducing their headquarters to colonies. At the height of their powers, they might have had far more than these." Klein thought and asked again, "Then, do you know the Rose School of Thought member that is able to make an entire mountain tremble with just one arm?" He planned on describing the arm's traits, but he realized that he hadn't dared to look straight at it. Sharon listened quietly as her eyes darted around as though they came to life. She asked with a clear voice, "What did you encounter?" "A saint, an angel, as well as Sea King, an Aurora Order demigod, a monster byproduct from the Numinous Episcopate's artificial death." Klein silently made a self-deprecating comment as he said with a wry smile, "I got on the bad side with the Mother Tree of Desire, and I suffered an ambush from the Rose School of Thought. Thankfully, I was in Byam, allowing the Church of Storms and the Kingdom's military to take action. I also threw out an item corrupted with the true Creator's aura, as well as something related to the Numinous Episcopate. In short, it was chaos, and I took the opportunity to escape." He replied frankly, apart from hiding the existence of Miss Messenger and Mr. Azek. As for the matter of the true Creator, he believed that Miss Sharon had long known that he wasn't affected by the ravings. This could be explained by a timely psychological intervention or psychic treatment. "Mother Tree of Desire," Sharon murmured the name as rare emotional upheavals slowly appeared in her eyes. Klein didn't have the interpretation abilities of a spectator, and he was unable to tell what was exactly on Sharon's mind. He could only sense that she felt a little fear and loathing. Sharon quickly restrained her abnormal reaction, turning back into an extremely exquisite doll. She looked at Sherlock Moriarty and said, "You are very lucky and very mysterious." Klein smiled without a word, neither lying nor explaining. Sharon didn't inquire as she said, "You might have met Sua. He is an abomination born 922 years ago, and claims to be the son of the chained god. He is also the present leader of the Rose School of Thought." "No way. The Rose School of Thought sent its leader, and a demigod to deal with me. I'm just a mere sequence 5. If not for Orange Light Hilarian's warning, I might have already been captured by the Rose School of Thought. Klein felt a chill run down his back again as he asked, "Is Abomination the name of the Prisoner Pathway Sequence 2 or Sequence 1? Probably." Sharon didn't give an affirmative answer. At this moment, without waiting for Klein's response, she said, "William Street has been destroyed." Klein had pondered what kind of reaction he should have when Miss Sharon raised the topic, so he immediately frowned. "By who? When did it happen?" "The Nighthawks and Machinery Hive Mind. About 2 months ago." Sharon had clearly gathered the corresponding intelligence. Klein nodded solemnly and after some deep thought said, "Perhaps we've neglected something. That evil spirit didn't need us to rescue it. It was still controlling Baronet Pound. Could it be that something happened to that gentleman, incurring the notice of the Nighthawks and Machinery Hive Minds?" Klein offered a guess filled with half-truths without utmost confidence. Sharon nodded. "Baronet Pound died during one of his revelries." "That's it. That's the end to Alista Tudor's final bloodline?" Klein thought and said, "How's the situation with William Street at the moment?" "Some high-rise buildings are being built," Sharon described without much of an expression. "People monitored it in secret at the beginning, but the surveillance decreased with time, diminishing to 0 early last month." Klein pondered for a few seconds and said, "Have you gone down to explore it?" Sharon's eyes swept his face. "No. This is her remembering our unwritten agreement. To explore it together because we found it together? What a noble-hearted lady. The Rose School of Thought's temperance faction is infinitely times better than the indulgence faction." Klein probed, "Shall we go now?" "All right," Sharon succinctly expressed her stance. Klein immediately instructed the carriage driver, and he changed the destination to William Street at the intersection of Westboro and Empressboro. Along the way, he casually mentioned what he heard and saw at sea, as well as the experiences that didn't involve his secrets. Although Sharon didn't answer him, she listened attentively, seemingly interested. This made Klein recall the time when he first got to know her as Miss Bodyguard. She sat on the illusory high-back chair in the oriel window's glass. Her right hand held her cheek, as she seriously listened to his conversation with Ian. She had great potential in being a spectator. The carriage passed through the silent streets in the drizzle, before finally arriving near William Street. Without approaching the area, Klein and Sharon discovered that the area had become a huge worksite. After circling to the region that matched the underground ruins, they stood behind a huge tree with a lush canopy. Klein said to Sharon, who wasn't drenched by the rain despite not holding an umbrella, "Let's head down." As the rain fell, they passed through Sharon's blonde hair and body before hitting the ground. "All right." Sharon didn't ask how Sherlock Moriarty was planning on heading down with her. Klein reached his hand into his pocket and easily removed the wall of spirituality, and he opened the iron cigar case. Beside him, a figure suddenly appeared. It was none other than Admiral of Bloodsinger, who wore a dark red coat and an old triangular hat. "You will head down in my stead," Klein said with a smile. Immediately following that, he controlled his marionette in a composed manner. Senior immediately pressed his hand to his chest and bowed at Sharon. "Good evening. I'm honored to work with you." Sharon swept her gaze across Klein and Senior, and without a word, her body sank into the soil. Miss Sharon seems to detest Senior quite significantly." Klein curled his lips and made Admiral of Blood rapidly turn into a wraith and sink. As for himself, he leaned on a tree, half closed his eyes as he seriously controlled the marionette. There wasn't anyone around him, and the drizzle was light and the streetlights dim. Slowly, Klein found the feeling of being a marionettist. His vision and Senior's vision overlapped with one another as he saw black-brown soil, squirming worms, and miscellaneous items in between the rocks. As they passed through layers of obstacles, they arrived at the region where the ruin once was. The dome ceiling had collapsed and the stone columns had snapped. The area was filled with soil and rubble, looking nothing like it once was. Such a scene made Klein believe that the humanoid statues of the 6 deities had been completely destroyed. To his joy, their location was relatively close to the room which sealed the evil spirit. That meant that he didn't need to worry that any subsequent exploration would exceed the 100-meter range for the control of his marionette. Amidst the smell of soil and rot, they soon entered the previously menacing room. However, between the rubble and soil, there were only a few signs of crushed bone and rotting clothes. The dark gold and deep blue light from before had all vanished. The beyonder characteristics have been taken away by the Nighthawks and machinery hive mind. Señor's expression twitched as it perfectly reflected Klein's mood. Sharon turned around in the dark, solid environment and gently shook her head. They didn't send anyone in. There are no traces of living creatures existing in here. That's right. If a living person had entered and exited this room over the past half-year, a wraith should be able to sense it. Besides, the deity statues obviously cannot be seen by the Nighthawks and machinery hive mind. Where did those beyonder characteristics go? As Klein frowned, Señor had a similar reaction. Could it be that the evil spirit wasn't completely obliterated? It had long escaped. Klein thought about it when he suddenly came to an alarming conclusion. He held back his emotions and made Señor pass through the soil and rubble-filled room with Sharon, and they arrived at the spot where the bloody door previously stood. And at that moment, only a few splinters proved that it existed before. After proceeding forward a few meters, the two truly entered the room where the evil spirit was sealed. It had likewise been destroyed and buried. Klein used Señor's body and eyes to look for clues as he flew about. There should be a black highback chair here. Sharon stopped and pointed at the splinters above two rocks. Klein instantly recalled the scene he had once seen in the dream. The young man suspected of being Medici had sat on a high-backed chair. His head drooped low as though dead. Sharon didn't pause. She continued proceeding in the compressed soil in search for any traces. Suddenly she spoke again. There should be one here. Another one? A second black high-backed chair? Klein floated over in surprise. Chapter 736. Third chair. Señor, in his wraith form, passed through the thick soil and rocks under Klein's control, arriving beside Sharon. He saw a damaged armrest which had asymmetrical patterns buried there, looking rather similar, but also different from the splinters they discovered moments ago. The armrest wasn't pure black in color. Their patterns exuded a dark red color, as though it was an intersection of iron and blood. Recalling the scene from his nightmare, Klein determined that this wasn't the high-backed chair that the entity suspected to be Medici sat on. This was the second chair. The room that sealed the evil spirit had at least two high-backed chairs. Klein and Sharon didn't say a word as they circled around in different directions to search for other clues. Before long, they discovered the evidence of a third high-backed chair. It was the leg of a chair, mainly dark red in color with pure black patterns. It was completely different from the other two kinds of splinters. Perhaps it's a problem caused by the asymmetrical trait of the fourth epoch. Klein knew Sharon's style, volunteering to speak and saying something even he couldn't believe. In the nightmare that resulted from the evil spirit's influence, the colors of the high-backed chairs were, at the very least, uniform. Sharon shook her head slightly. 3 has more of a ritualistic feel. She was implying that the innocent victims of Blood Emperor Alista Tudor weren't just one person back then. Perhaps a ritual had been held in the room that sealed the evil spirit. Klein was taken aback by what he heard as a scene flashed through his mind. In a spacious and dark room, 3 high-backed chairs of different styles were placed around a particular point in the center. And sitting on each chair was a breathless humanoid creature with a drooping head. Among them included Red Angel Medici. The scene became clearer as Klein instantly connected 2 additional matters together. The main ingredients of the Sequence 0 Black Emperor's potion is the uniqueness and 2 Sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics. Blood Emperor Alista Tudor had apparently forcefully jumped from the Black Emperor pathway's Sequence 1 Prince of Disorder to the Red Priest Sequence 0, which was in a neighboring pathway. As a result, he became a half-crazy true god. As his thoughts whirred, Klein quickly had a theory. This room had once held a Sequence 0 advancement ritual needed for a true god. Of course, according to the complicated ritual needed by a Black Emperor, this was only part of the requirement. The pathway that represented war had clearly required the entire continent to be in chaos, and at war to match in scale. And Blood Emperor Alista Tudor doesn't have the corresponding sequence 1 Beyonder characteristic, so his Red Priest potion requires 3 sequence 1 angels, or sealed artifacts to provide him with the Beyonder characteristics. There happens to be 3 highback chairs here. Yes, the evil spirit suspected to be Red Angel Medici said that to help it escape its seal, one should find direct descendants of the Sauron, Einhorn, and Medici family, and then extract 10 milliliters of blood and mix them with holy water. Sauron and Einhorn wield the Hunter pathway and are also angel families of the Red Priest Beyonder pathway. They've existed since the 4th epoch to this day. One of them has already waned, only capable of controlling the spy network and a military faction in Intis, while the other remains the royal family of Faceac. Thoughts flashed through Klein's mind as he had a new belief regarding what had happened in the room, as well as the true identity of the evil spirit. On the other 2 highback chairs sat the ancestors of the Sauron and Einhorn families, sequence 1 angels, together with War Angel Medici, who very likely possessed the pathway's uniqueness. All the main ingredients of the Red Priest potion were gathered, and that evil spirit is highly likely to not be the pure Red Angel Medici. It might include the remnant psyche and hatred of the Sauron and Einhorn family's ancestors. Man, this place once sacrificed 3 sequence 1 angels. Before they died, their curses and the ritual itself left effects, making this room become abnormally horrifying, as well as sealing it. Thankfully, I reported this to the churches ahead of time to let them deal with it. Otherwise, we might have died here if we relied on ourselves. It would be the same even if Miss Sharon and I advanced to sequence 4. We would become food for the evil spirit. Klein felt a sense of fear and joy. Meanwhile, he began to understand the reason why the Red Priest card had landed in the hands of the evil spirit. After all, the former highest-ranking members of a pathway were buried here in this underground ruin. The convergence of Beyonder characteristics would naturally lure Beyonders of the same pathway over without any deviations. Furthermore, as Roselle once said, whatever separates will definitely converge, and whatever converges will definitely separate. After Blood Emperor Alista Tudor perished, the true god characteristic he possessed, which is the sequence 0 characteristic, will likely split into 4 pieces. One is the uniqueness, an abstract item or concept, while the remaining 3 are 3 sets of sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics. If it wasn't because of that, the corresponding Beyonder pathway wouldn't have any more sequence 1s when someone becomes a god. Could 1 or 2 of these sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics be attracted, entering the sealed room? This is likely one of the reasons why the card of blasphemy was lured over. The more Klein thought, the more he felt that he had previously underestimated the evil spirit. They live up to being angels who advance from conspirers. Standing under the tree, Klein controlled Senior to say, "Perhaps it really is a ritual. It's related to Blood Emperor Alista Tudor. The scale and level involved must be great." Sharon added after silently listening, "Sauron Einhorn Medici." Miss Sharon is also suspecting if the 3 highback chairs once belonged to different angels from the details requested by the evil spirit. Klein thought for a moment, and he divulged something through Senior. Blood Emperor Alista Tudor is likely a true god from the Hunter pathway. The card of blasphemy is represented by the Red Priest. Sharon remained silent for a few seconds, as though she came to a realization regarding certain matters as she said, "That card is gone." She was referring to the Red Priest card which the evil spirit had formerly shown them. Perhaps that evil spirit had long escaped before the Nighthawks and Machinery hive mind destroyed this place. Klein shared his theory, and it had taken away all the Beyonder characteristics and that Red Priest card. Sharon silently surveyed the area and said, "It's very crafty. It wouldn't leave behind any obvious clues." "That's right. The Beyonder characteristics outside the sealed room are clearly not at sequence 4. To an evil spirit who was once a king of angels, they don't have any allure. Likewise for the Red Priest card, it can be understood that it took away the things in the room. But why didn't it leave anything? It's like telling others something like, 'Haha, I've fooled you. I've already successfully escaped. Catch me if you can.' Wait, perhaps that's exactly what it wishes to convey." As Klein thought, He suddenly found it amusing as he made Senior speak. No, being crafty doesn't necessarily equate to not leaving clues. The sequence 8 of the Hunter pathway is provoker. At that moment, the red angel that surfaced in his mind had the picture of Anderson Hood over it. Sharon listened silently as she gaped her mouth slightly, but she didn't say a word. Similarly, Klein was speechless. He felt that the Beyonders of the Hunter pathway truly had a crystal-clear style. In comparison, the red-haired Helene didn't appear anything like someone from the Sauron family. However, she was rather talented at provoking Vice Admiral Ailment. Yes, back then, the Sauron family members also infuriated Roselle terribly. Klein silently exhaled as he lampooned. The silent mood was soon broken by Klein. Senior looked around and said a joke. Perhaps that's the reason why they were captured and brought here. Who was helping Alista Tudor? Sharon's translucent figure asked, but she didn't seem to look forward to the answer. Perhaps it's the 6 deities. Klein recalled the 6 deity statues in the hall. However, he had second thoughts. However, the 7 deities supported the Trunsoist Empire. The Sauron and Einhorn families were powerful aristocrats of the empire. Of course, it cannot be ruled out that they first supported Tudor, and later had a falling out after he went mad. If it's not the 6 deities, does it mean that there are other deities supporting Alista Tudor? Who would it be? Klein thought in silence. Sharon didn't stay any longer, as she floated up to the surface, returning to the tree. Klein stored away Senior's wraith, allowing it to enter the gold coin inside the iron cigar case. Then he asked in passing, "Actually, I've always been curious. Where do the powers of pure evil spirits and wraiths, who do not have Beyonder characteristics, come from?" "The spirit world," Sharon answered simply. "The conservation of Beyonder characteristics. But the source of Beyonder powers isn't necessarily the same? Yes, perhaps the spirit world itself is the product of some Beyonder characteristics." Klein nodded and looked at the soil beneath his feet. "I'll continue investigating the whereabouts of the evil spirit. I'll inform you if there's anything." He planned on asking Rhodes later. With that said, he took out a pen and paper, scribbled down the method to summoning his messenger, and handed it over. "You can write to me if there's anything." Sharon received the piece of paper and seriously looked at it. "I'll be in the Bravehearts bar. Letters can be mailed to 126 Guard Street, Hillstonborough. Address it to Ma'am Miriam." "All right." Klein stuffed his pen into his pocket. In front of Sharon, he used a ritualistic dagger to create a wall of spirituality and resealed the iron cigar case. Following that, he crossed the street to stop a carriage like a gentleman, sending Sharon all the way back to the Backland Bridge area. After doing this, he returned to the high-end hotel in Hillstonborough. Midway, he changed his appearance and switched carriages. Byam. Inside the seaweed bar, Danitz, who had spent some time drifting at sea, once again stepped back into the city of generosity. He planned on helping the resistance handle some matters. He pressed down on his cap, sat at the corner of the bar counter, and prepared to first hear about the recent news. He didn't wish to become a bounty reward due to untimely or inaccurate intelligence. At this moment, he heard an adventurer beside him say to his companion, "Hey, do you think Gehrman Sparrow will get someone to claim Admiral of Blood's bounty on his behalf?" Danitz subconsciously looked up, looking at the speaker with a blank, confused look. Chapter 737. Official appearance. Why would the madman Gehrman Sparrow need to find someone to claim Admiral of Blood's bounty on his behalf? That's not right. Why would he be able to claim the bounty? Danitz suddenly snapped out of his confusion and grasped the crux of the matter. He immediately lowered his head to prevent himself from exposing his shock and confusion. The adventurers beside him continued their conversation. How would that be possible? No one would dare to claim it on his behalf. That's right. Unless they wished to bear the wrath of the Church of Storms or selling out Gehrman Sparrow. 42,000 pounds. If I can receive that sum of money, I'll immediately head to Backland to be a tycoon. Haha. Wouldn't you be enjoying yourself in the Red Theater for half a year first? Perhaps Gehrman Sparrow can claim it from Intis, Fasak or Fainapotter. Although it wouldn't be as much as 42,000 pounds. It's definitely in no way a low amount. As the adventurers conversed, they began imagining their lives after obtaining £42,000. They even had a conflict of opinions and began arguing with flushed faces. No way. Are they implying that Gehrman has finished off Admiral of Blood? No, although that madman always had the intention of doing so. He lacks the required support that he needs. He needs to work with Captain Anderson Hood? Danitz stood up, pressed down his cap, and kept his head down. He rushed towards the billiard and card rooms where there were newspapers placed there. Just as he left, the few adventurers from before looked at his back and spoke in hushed tones. Do you recognize him? It's obvious that something is wrong with how he was acting so suspiciously. I didn't get a good look, but I think he's a pirate who's here to gather intel. Shall we? An adventurer gestured, slicing his hand across his throat. Perhaps it's someone we can't afford to offend. Let's wait and see. Another adventurer stopped his companion's actions. Danitz entered an empty billiard room, came to the corner, and picked up a stack of newspapers. He quickly flipped through them, and slowly, his expression twisted. What did that madman do? He really finished off Admiral of Blood? It's only been a few months, and his strength has risen to such a level? Furthermore, the papers didn't even mention Anderson Hood. Danitz was alarmed and thankful that he wisely chose to submit in front of Gehrman Sparrow. Otherwise, people would have long seen the news of him being hunted in exchange for bounty money. No. Back then, my death wouldn't have been published. Man, Gehrman Sparrow is really a member of a cult. As he thought, Danitz suddenly froze like a statue. That was because he was probably likely a member of that cult. Haha, the church and military often likes to exaggerate. Yes, it's a secret organization, not a cult. Danitz consoled himself before having the feeling that the organization backing Gehrman Sparrow was surprisingly mysterious and abnormally powerful. The successful hunting of Senor, one of the 7 pirate admirals, was evidence. Phew. Danitz exhaled as he apprehensively praised the fool inwardly, expressing his desires to handle matters seriously. In a small building near the Governor-General's office, Eland and Oz Kent walked out. It's finally over. Eland sighed as he wore his captain's hat. Oz Kent rubbed his red brandy nose and added with a sigh, that's right. They had been interrogated while separated for 2 full days, because of Gehrman Sparrow. They were faced with interrogators who were best at such matters. Thankfully, Eland had never hidden anything from the beginning. He had reported to his superiors that Gehrman Sparrow was of unknown origins, but that he was friendly to the military. It had nothing to do with him, since the decision of making this crazy adventurer an informant, while having his background investigated, was made by the higher-ups. As for Oz Kent, there weren't any problems at all. He had followed regular protocol when claiming the bounty for Gehrman Sparrow. As they slowly walked towards the entrance in the middle of the garden, Eland said with a sigh, "Who knew that Gehrman Sparrow was that crazy and powerful?" According to the little information that they knew, finishing off Admiral of Blood was just one of the most ordinary and trivial matters that Gehrman Sparrow had done that day. And such a crazy person had made the choice of entering the dangerous Banshee to save a few passengers and crew members who had merely expressed their friendship to him. Eland later learned that the dangers lurking in Banshee had far exceeded his imagination. The Church of Storms had directly destroyed the entire place. If I had told the interrogators that Gehrman Sparrow has a soft and kind heart, they will definitely think I'm lying. Humans are really a mass of contradictions. Eland silently shook his head. After hearing Eland's poignant remark, Oz Kent replied with a wry smile. Back then, I thought you introduced me to a relatively strong adventurer. But in the end, he even finished off Admiral of Blood. Damn it. I even think he has the strength to become the 5th king. You wouldn't doubt what I say if you look at the forest and those nearby mountains. That place, it's like. Eland glanced at Oz Kent and finished his sentence for him. It's like it was blasted by the coastal defenses more than 100 times over. That's right. Oz Kent agreed with Eland's description. By then the two had walked out the main entrance. Eland looked at the night sky with twinkling stars and the dark crimson moon. After a few seconds of silence, he adjusted his collar and said, "Let's hope he doesn't return to the sea again." Byam. 6 Sphere Street. Dressed in children's clothes, Denton ran up to the study and said to his elder sister who was practicing her sketching, "Donna, they say that Uncle Sparrow is a bad guy, a cultist and a murderer. They even showed me the newspapers." Donna turned her head as she wrinkled her nose. "No way. Uncle Sparrow is a righteous, brave and kind adventurer. We saw it with our own eyes. These are definitely more reliable than the papers." She hesitated for a moment before eloquently saying, Although he had a very terrifying and ugly appearance, it was the price for his dreams and the power to protect. Denton, remember, the papers often like to fabricate content based on rumors or hearsay. Yeah, Denton nodded heavily. I've already cursed them. Donna praised her brother and subconsciously looked out. She saw that the street lamps had cast their light into their garden. It was tranquil, serene and gentle. Hillstonborough, inside a high-class inn. Klein folded a white handkerchief and placed it in his left breast pocket, and he raised his hand to retrieve his half-top hat. Today was the day for the mysterious tycoon Dwayne Dantes to officially appear in public. He didn't wait for the sale of the bike company's shares or the mystical items, and he planned on first using the remaining £2,962 he had to cover his initial expenses. This was sufficient, as it was equivalent to 6 to 7 years of an upper-middle-class family's income. Rhodes didn't enter my dream last night. This means that he's unable to sense my return to Backlund without any close contact. That's a good thing. Yes, I'll contact it with the radio transceiver tonight to inquire about the evil spirit. I won't need to go through this hassle in the future, Klein mumbled inwardly as he held his cane and walked out of the hotel. At that moment, the sun was shining through the thin mist, elating the moods of the pedestrians. Klein got onto a carriage, and he went straight for Sherwood Borough's City Family Servant Assistance Association at 9 Canalawell Street. He planned on hiring an experienced butler and get him to organize the servants needed for a villa. In the City Family Servant Assistance Association, Balin ended a conversation with a male colleague that came to talk to her. She lowered her head to clean up the 2 drops of black tea on her lotus leaf-colored dress. At that moment, she heard a mellow and heavy voice that time had left its mark on. "Good morning, ma'am." Balin hurriedly looked up and towards the reception. She saw a gentleman in his 40s, wearing a tailcoat made of silk and carrying a gold-inlaid cane. Apart from the 3 buttons on his clothes, there was a golden chain that extended into his pocket. This gentleman had a pair of deep blue eyes, and he was good-looking. Even the tiny white patches on the side of his hair had added to the air he exuded. Just a smile from him made Balin feel her cheeks turn warm. "Sir, how may I be of service?" "All right. How may I address you?" Balin hurriedly got up and said, "Dwayne Dantes." Klein warmly replied with a smile. "I wish to hire a butler, a good one. Mr. Dantes, please wait a moment. Have a seat." Balin hurriedly led Klein to the guest area, and she reached out to point at a cloth sofa. Klein held a smile without rushing or nagging her. He very patiently sat down and awaited the staff to provide him with a list of names of the butlers. What a gentleman! Oh no, I forgot to ask him what requirements he has. Balin raised her hand to touch her cheeks and said, "Mr. Dantes, what kind of butlers are you looking for?" Klein was already prepared as he replied with a mellow voice, "It's best if they have served in a noble family before." This aided Dantes in widening his social circle. Balin gradually grasped her professional knowledge as she said in detail, "Such butlers are rare. As you know, nobles seldom change their butlers unless they're unable to provide an effective service. Furthermore, even if they aren't able to be a butler, they're able to fill other positions in a noble household. In addition, the wealthy often have a considerable desire towards such butlers, and they're willing to offer salaries with a premium. Mr. Dantes, we do have the kinds you are looking for, but their annual salaries are above £100. That makes the weekly salary to be about £2 and up. An ordinary butler's annual salary is £40 to £80, which is 15 soldi to £1.10 soldi a week. That appears to be at the level of a technical worker's salary, but the master will provide room, food, clothes, charcoal, and other necessities. A butler practically has zero expenditure. An annual salary of £100 and above is really expensive. Klein quickly did the math as he replied as though he didn't take much notice. No problem. As long as they're good butlers. Chapter 738. Life of a Tycoon. Please wait a moment. Would you like coffee or tea? Balin asked warmly. Klein laughed and replied, I enjoyed coffee when I was younger, the rich and fragrant kind, but now I prefer black tea. I prefer black tea as well. Then a cup of Marquis black tea? Balin suggested with a smile. The coffee and tea provided to guests at the City Family Servant Assistance Association were ordinary in quality, ranging from low to medium quality. Marquis black tea was tea that Balin had brought from home for her own enjoyment. Klein wasn't a simpleton, and he was great at observing. Just as he walked into the door, he would take in everything about his surroundings without anyone noticing. He discovered that the coffee and tea container placed in the display case were very ordinary, and he believed that the quality was definitely lacking. Therefore, he believed that Marquis black tea was likely reserved by the association for VIPs, or it belonged to the lady before him. Regardless, it expressed how sincere she was. He didn't expose her as he smiled. Thank you. You leave me unable to reject your suggestion. How may I address you, ma'am? Balin, just call me Balin, Balin said with a smile which resembled a blooming flower. She immediately briskly walked inside, and she selected suitable candidates from her colleague. Then, she returned to the reception counter, picked up a tin container, and skillfully brewed a cup of black tea. Sigh, with a good-looking face and a good disposition, while being dressed in a way that speaks volumes of my status. I can still sense the friendliness from a beautiful girl even though I'm middle-aged. Klein was having such an experience for the first time, as he couldn't help but sigh. This made him further understand the importance of the faceless principle of ultimately being yourself. If he didn't keep this in mind and lost himself to the benefits brought about by his appearance, he would keep maintaining the corresponding appearance, resulting in him forgetting or even rejecting his former self, and he would gradually lose his identity. Soon, Balin carried a white gold-rimmed porcelain teacup and placed it in front of Dwayne Dantes. She said with a smile, "It still needs some time to cool down." Klein looked down at the cup, and he said half-jokingly, "Perfect, this gives me the time to adjust my mood to more formally face this cup of black tea." His compliments and gratitude made Balin feel even better. She found him a true gentleman, one who knew his way with words. He's definitely not a believer of the Lord of Storms. Balin combed her slightly curly brown hair, and she returned to the room to hurry her colleague. Before long, she came over with a stack of documents and sat on the single-seater beside him. "After the screening, we have 3 suitable butlers. I'll briefly introduce them to you. The first person is Mr. Asnia, age 55. He once served Viscount Yorkville, but after this Viscount had a failed mining prospect investment, his family fell into a particular financial situation, and he had to sell its land and manors while terminating many of its servants. In the past decade, he was hired by 2 tycoons, and he has contributed significantly to the management of their households." As she spoke, Balin's brown eyes sparkled like 2 stars hid in them. She exuded the unique vibes of a teenage girl. Klein nodded slightly and said, "Then why did he leave the 2 tycoons?" Balin replied with a smile. The first tycoon invested greatly in East Balam, and his whole family had moved there. Mr. Asnia wasn't willing to leave Backlund, so he offered to resign. The second tycoon's health isn't too good, and he had handed the family business to his son, who has a butler he trusts more. Mr. Asnia is a believer of the Evernight goddess, and his political inclinations is with the Conservative Party. He expects an annual salary of £130. May goddess bless him. Klein tapped 4 spots in a clockwise manner on his chest, forming the sign of the crimson moon. Balin's eyes lit up as she asked, "Mr. Dantes, are you a believer of the goddess?" "Of course." Klein nodded with a smile without explaining further. "It's no wonder he's so gentle." Balin praised inwardly as she continued introducing Mr. Reback, age 48. He once served the Negan family, and he was the deputy butler for a long period of time, as well as an assistant to the butler. Later, after a transaction, he became Baron Syndras's butler. Shortly after Duke Negan was assassinated, Mr. Reback, whose contract came to an end, didn't receive a new contract from the Baron, so he had no choice but to seek our help. He's not a staunch believer of the Lord of Storms, and his personality is without problems. His political inclination is with the Conservative Party. He expects an annual salary of £120. Klein listened silently, nodding from time to time as a response, but he didn't cut off Balin's description. Balin flipped through the documents, and took a few glances and spoke again. The third person is Mr. Walter, age 42. He had been the land steward and assistant butler at Viscount Conrad's household. Due to certain matters, he had a conflict with the butler, and he chose to leave. He expects an annual salary of £115. He's a believer of the Evernight goddess, and his political inclination is with the new party. Orvie Island's new Governor-General is a member of Viscount Conrad's family. This family pledges loyalty to the royal family. The relevant information quickly flashed through Klein's mind. After the introduction, Balin handed over the stack of documents. Mr. Dantes, who do you wish to choose? Klein fell silent for a few seconds before saying with a smile, "Let's do this. Let the three of them come to where I live tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll meet them and have a chat with them to make the final decision." He knew that such associations didn't provide lodging, and it was purely an agency. Even if he made the selection right there and then, he still had to wait until the afternoon or tomorrow to see his butler. Therefore, he decided to have a small interview to select the person that matched his intentions the best. "No problem," Balin said with a smile. "May I know your address?" Klein sipped the black tea, picked up a pen and paper from the table, and wrote down the location and name of the hotel he was staying in. "You just came to Backland?" Balin blurted out a question when she saw it. Only then did she realize that Mr. Dwayne Dantes' skin was slightly darker than normal. It was slightly bronze-colored, seemingly a result of tanning. It gave him quite a rugged flavor. Yes, he doesn't have a Backland accent. Balin slowly recalled more details. Klein smiled. "I came from Desi Bay. I'm waiting for an excellent butler to help me seek out a suitable house and servants." After handing over a £3 deposit, he politely drank another sip of black tea and got up to bid farewell. Balin sent him all the way out of the door and watched him board the carriage. Mr. Dantes also seems to be a tycoon. Compared to that, his bearing and gentlemanliness are even more charming. Balin stood in her spot as she casually thought. On the carriage, Klein half closed his eyes as he leaned against the wall, and he couldn't help but calculate the subsequent expenditures awaiting him. The butler will cost around £120. Taking into account the average cost, a valet will cost £35, a chef £30, a gardener £25, a carriage driver £25, a nursery governess £20, 3 ordinary ladies maid £15, and 3 maidservants £10. This way, just the servants alone would cost £330 a year. It's equivalent to £6.7 solely a week. This already exceeds my salary back in Tingen. Furthermore, I'll need to have a carriage which costs about £100. I need a garden and house, and the weekly rental fee is about £2. With all the food, clothes, and charcoal expenditure for all these people, the overall cost is ridiculous. Is this the life of a tycoon? Klein suddenly felt a little regret over choosing such a persona. He exhaled as he tried hard to ignore the matter. He took a carriage to Phelps Street in Northborough. There was a pure black cathedral here, with a clock tower on each side, producing a symmetrical beauty. This was none other than the headquarters of the Backland Diocese of the Church of the Evernight Goddess, St. Samuel Cathedral. Klein adjusted the handkerchief on his left pocket, held a golden-laid cane, and strode into the cathedral and walked down the quiet aisle. Under the sunlight which penetrated the colored glass panes, he came to the main prayer hall. It was very dark, making one's mood automatically turn peaceful. Klein casually found a spot, leaned his cane, and took off his hat. He then closed his eyes and prayed. Time passed, and after listening to the preaching, he slowly got up, walked to the altar, and bowed at the bishop with short black hair. Then, he walked to the donation box by the side. Exhaling silently, Klein took out 2 10-pound notes, 6 5-pound notes and stuffed it inside. The bishop caught this sight through the corner of his eye, as his expression couldn't help but turn soft. Typically, unless they specially solicited for donations or received donations from a deceased's will, the cathedral's donation box received tens of pounds at most. This meant that the person was a tycoon, a rich person. Chapter 739. The Encountered and the Yet to be Encountered in the main prayer hall of St. Samuel Cathedral. The black-haired bishop retracted his gaze and stopped looking at the middle-aged gentleman in front of the donation box. Nor did he have any intention of chatting with him. Here, before the holy altar, he represented the church, and he was under the goddess's sight. He couldn't show more warmth towards anyone because of their generous donations. However, he remembered the gentleman's good looks and mature, refined disposition. He planned on attempting to get to know him when the opportunity arose in the future. Seeing the final note slip into the donation box, Klein closed his eyes and turned to leave. When passing the preaching bishop, he deliberately glanced at the clergyman and smiled with a nod. The bishop returned with a warm smile as he tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion. Klein wasn't in a hurry to make contact with the relevant personnel. He needed his actions to adhere to logic and not to have any jarring actions that would incur suspicion. He silently and coolly turned to the side to give way to another devotee, and he made way down the aisle back to his seat. He then picked up his hat and cane before walking out of the cathedral. At that moment, with the preaching done, the devotees either went forward to the donation box to express their sincerity, or they got up to leave without feeling that there was anything wrong. After all, it wasn't compulsory. Even a devotee who passionately donated was unable to donate money every time. It usually depended on the family's exact situation, doing it once or twice every 1 to 2 weeks. At the level of a commoner, each donation was in the form of pennies, while middle-class devotees ranged from 3 to 5 solely. The wealthy and nobles used pounds, but they didn't exceed 100 pounds. This was under ordinary circumstances. During the Evernight Goddess's Holy Memorial Day every year, which was the Winter Gifts Day, the amount donated would increase several times. The commoners with a little bit more cash to spare would choose 2 to 3 solely, while the middle class donated around 5 pounds. As for the members of high society, they directly donated to the diocese bishop or church's charitable organizations, ranging from several hundred pounds to a few thousand pounds. Winter Gifts Day was the day in a year when the night was longest. It was believed to be the birthday of the Evernight Goddess. After leaving the cathedral, Klein stood at the square outside. He watched idly as pigeons flew up, circled around, and landed. He even bought some food from a nearby street hawker. He leisurely fed the pigeons, and he had no plans on flipping through the advertisements in the newspapers to find a suitable residence in Northborough, since it was the butler's mission. An excellent butler that had resided in Backland for many years had ought to know the different nobles and tycoons, as well as the best middle-class individuals who could provide their masters with help. He would know which streets to live in, and from there, purposefully choose a residence. The interaction between neighbors was the first step for a newcomer to enter the relevant circles. Be it the Carlton Club where members of the Conservative Party gather, the Club of the Free of the New Party, or the various in-service and veteran clubs for the military. They also require a recommendation before any contact can be made. This is also the so-called club politics in the kingdom. Klein reined in his thoughts as he considered what he should do after he was done setting up the pigeon-feeding persona he created. After careful consideration, he discovered that there was really nothing that needed his immediate attention. This was because his plans were stuck on the surface. Hence, he planned on enjoying an expensive and sumptuous lunch. This was an action Dwayne Dantes ought to have, and it was also a result of Klein's own curiosity. In the months when he was in Backland, he didn't manage to muster the courage to head to the most famous restaurants in the big city to broaden his horizons. He kept choosing one of the 4. his own dining hall, the buffet cafeteria of the Quelag Club, the ordinary restaurants by the streets, and Lawyer Jurgen's dining hall. Otherwise, he would head to East Borough and settle his breakfast and lunch in what seemed like a very oily coffee shop. Labori Restaurant? Their head chef is said to be from Earl Hall's family. He has provided tycoons, successful lawyers, high-ranking government officials with usually hard-to-come-by flavors. Earl Hall had apparently invested in this restaurant and holds quite a major stake in it. This restaurant mainly serves local Backland cuisine. It's very famous for its desserts, but its price is horrendous. Intis Srenzo Restaurant. It serves the most authentic Intis cuisine. Many of the specialty dishes use Rozel's name, claiming that it originated from the Emperor's Palace dishes. Besides, it's not like most of the restaurants of the same class, where they only offer a few main dishes every day. It has a wide variety. Klein recalled the information of the top restaurants he had read from the papers and magazines, and he finally decided on trying out the Emperor's Palace dishes. He didn't stay any longer, as he got on a horse carriage and headed for the Intis Srenzo restaurant in West Borough. At the entrance, Klein handed his coat, hat, and cane to a red-vested waiter as he asked, "Are there still any available seats? I didn't make a reservation." "Yes, sir." The red-vested waiter didn't show any abnormal behavior as he humbly asked, "Sir, is this your first time here? Are you alone?" Klein nodded frankly and smiled. "Yes." "Then may I have the honor of introducing you to some of our most unique dishes and fine wine that our restaurant has to offer?" As the waiter spoke, he led the guest in. "That's exactly what I need." Klein passed through the beautifully decorated door, and he saw walls that nearly reflected golden light. Instantly, he felt as though he was in a gold vault. Then, he noticed oil paintings hung on the walls, marble statues that were placed at suitable locations, as well as golden objects that were embedded or adorned in different spots. "Please watch your step," the attendant warned him as he led Klein to a spot by the window. Violin music played in the background of the restaurant. The waiter brought him a food menu and a wine menu as he flipped it open and introduced, "These are our most famous dishes: red braised taggia beef short ribs, black truffle porcini mushrooms, Intis-styled foie gras. I would like to point out that our foie gras comes directly from the Bonus Farm in Champagne Province in the Intis Kingdom." As Klein listened to the waiter's introduction, he browsed through the menu written in ancient Fasak, as the prices caught his eyes. After introducing the main dishes, starters, and desserts, the waiter began explaining how the wines should be matched. Finally, he said, "The champagne, red wine, and white wine we have all come from a famous brewery from Champagne Province. We even have Ormer red wine from 1330. Its price is £126. If you wish to purchase it, you can take it along with you or store it with us, drinking a cup every time you come. £126. I can already hire an excellent butler with that." Klein smiled with great grace. "Your dishes and wine are excellent. It's really difficult to choose." The red-vested waiter gave a hospitable smile. "You can choose the chef's recommendations for the day. It will be an authentic and delicious Intis meal arranged by our main chef. There are 3 choices, £15, £10, and £8. "I don't want any of them." Klein leaned back slightly as he smiled. "I'll have the £15 set meal." "All right." The red-vested waiter took away the menus, and he walked towards the kitchen. Klein drew a breath and slowly exhaled as he casually observed the area before him. Suddenly he saw a familiar figure. It was a lady wearing an olive-green dress. She was tall, with an excellent figure. She wore a black, out-of-fashion bonnet, with a fishnet veil hanging down and concealing her face. As a faceless, Klein had a strong ability to discern the external characteristics of humans. He immediately identified the lady. Queen Mystic, Emperor Rozel's eldest daughter, Bernadette Gustave. He wasn't in a rush to look away, as he naturally moved his gaze to the side. Bernadette didn't seem to notice anything abnormal, as she disappeared around the stairwell. Why would she appear here? Right, this restaurant's specialty is Emperor Rozel's palace dishes. It's nothing like the Chinese cuisine I thought it would be. He probably doesn't know how to cook and at best is able to describe the concept. There are stir-fried dishes here. Could the owner behind the scenes actually be her? Why is she here in Backland instead of floating out at sea? Hasn't she found hero bandit Black Emperor? Klein sat down with a calm expression as questions arose in his mind. Meanwhile, on the streets, a carriage was driving towards the Intis Srenzo restaurant. Sitting in the carriage was Aaron Series' family. This famous surgeon was a member of the Quelag Club, a good friend of Sherlock Moriarty. He had once sought out the detective to handle Will Acceptance matter. Ever since his wife became pregnant, he found his luck had become rather good. His business was improving by the day, and his income was rising by the month. He recently successfully completed Baron Syndra's surgery, and he received the commendation of this newly promoted noble. He was invited to the Srenzo restaurant to have lunch with him. It's said that the ice cream is pretty good. Aaron smiled as he said to his wife. His wife was a black-haired beauty, and she was already obviously pregnant. She smiled demurely and said, I'm more looking forward to Emperor Rosel's palace dishes. Aaron tersely acknowledged as he looked out the window. We're almost there. Just as he said that, his wife held her tummy and frowned. It hurts a little. Aaron, who wasn't a first-time father, immediately checked on her and didn't discover any problems. But his wife was feeling greater discomfort. The child in her womb seemed to be pulling a tantrum. I think I won't go over there. I wish to return home to rest, Aaron's wife suggested. Aaron thought for a while and said, I'll accompany you home. He immediately ordered his valet. Get down here and head to the restaurant to apologize to Baron Syndra's on my behalf. After the carriage began its return, the discomfort that Aaron's wife suffered was relieved. By the time she walked through the doorstep, everything was normal. She pointed at her tummy, exasperated. It appears like he doesn't want to eat ice cream. Achoo! In the Intis Srenzo restaurant, Klein, who hadn't spared any dish, felt the pinch but began enjoying his ice cream in satisfaction. Midway, he found his nose itchy as he sneezed into a piece of tissue paper he pulled out. Westboro, in a dark house. Furs, who had already advanced to astrologer, participated in all kinds of Beyonder gatherings, in search of the possibility to earn money. She owed Zio 220 pounds, and she was even suspected by her good friend of being involved in illegal gambling. I can't even afford to buy my essential crystal ball. As her thoughts wandered, Furs suddenly heard a member at the gathering say, I wish to sell a moon puppet. Chapter 740, Self-Recommendation Moon Puppet. Furs's heart palpitated as she refocused and looked at the gathering participant who had just spoken. The man in a black iron mask had already taken out a small puppet and showed it to everyone. I have a friend who discovered a series of graves deep in the southern continent's Paws Valley. This puppet was stuck in the deceased's right eye socket. Furs observed the puppet seriously just like the other gathering participants. She discovered that it was slender, and its entire body resembled a tiny wooden piece that had been engraved with crescent-like eyes and a mouth. Embedded in it were dried grass and flowers. Doesn't look like anything special, Furs mumbled inwardly. Her spiritual perception didn't sense anything as her pen-wielding hand continued hovering over a bronze-green notebook. The man in the iron mask continued the introduction. My friend and I are unable to determine what use this puppet has, and we can only suspect that it's not simple. It might also hide quite a secret. 60 pounds. For just 60 pounds you can have it. This price is very fair. Even if it has nothing to do with mysticism, it's not a bad antique worth 40 to 50 pounds. That is to say you'll be spending 10 pounds to have a chance of a pleasant surprise. To you this is a small sum of money. A very tempting explanation. This gentleman is likely a successful salesman. However, I don't even have 10 pounds. As Furs engaged in a self-deprecating laugh, she didn't believe that anyone would buy the so-called moon puppet of unknown origins and usage. Just as she had that thought, she heard a female voice which was deliberately suppressed. 50 pounds. Is she too rich, or is she willing to try her luck? Furs subconsciously turned her head to look at the speaking person, only to see the lady wearing a hooded long robe. Her face was hidden in the shadows. At that moment, the owner of the moon puppet laughed. I'll be more inclined to keep it for myself. Perhaps. There might come a time when I discover what's so special about it. As he spoke, he realized that no one was offering a better price. He immediately said, "Of course, as a gentleman, I'll satisfy your wish since you have expressed your desire and have given a reasonable price." "Deal," the hooded woman replied with a deep voice. Soon, the gathering's attendant helped them complete the transaction. Furs noticed that the lady's hand was trembling slightly after she received the moon puppet. She places great importance on the item. She might actually know what's so special about the puppet. Moon puppet. Moon. From the southern continent. Furs suddenly made connections and recalled the few primordial moon believers who Mr. Moon was searching for. She began having a suspicion that the hooded lady was one of them, or that she had a connection with them. Of course, she had zero evidence. She didn't even have much of a compelling reason to have such a guess. Phew. Furs silently exhaled as she decided to find a way to verify her theory. She casually moved the hard-covered notebook in her hand, making a yellowish-brown goatskin appear. On the piece of paper were all kinds of patterns that formed an ancient, mysterious picture of unknown intent. This was one of the pages of Lamino's travels, and it recorded a particular beyonder power. It wasn't a recorded power, which Furs had gathered herself, but one of the 5 original pages when she received it. Furs looked up, and she pretended to observe the transactions of the others, while fully taking in the hooded lady's situation. She discovered that there was a mosquito with dark brown spots on a nearby wall, and unknown worms that were slowly squirming on the ground. Furs's finger naturally slid across the yellowish-brown goatskin's pattern, as a complicated symbol quickly formed in her mind. Silently and without showing any odd signs, she felt that she had understood the brown pattern, as her thoughts connected with the other parties. The brown-spotted mosquito flew at a low height. It circled beneath the hooded lady and carefully clung to her front. The mosquito's vision was different from a human's, since an incomprehensible scene appeared in Furs's mind. But it soon disintegrated and reformed into a rather normal scene. The hooded lady had a rather curved outline with dark skin. Her brows were thin, and the corners of her mouth drooped significantly. Furs immediately recognized her. She was none other than the primordial moon believer, Windsor Baring, who Mr. Moon was searching for. An effective clue is worth £100, and directly finding her means £500. Furs recalled the reward, as she immediately became flustered. Her first reaction was to drive the mosquito to bite Windsor Baring and suck her blood. That way, she could later use astromancy to directly lock onto her location. However, she gave up the idea after struggling for a moment. That was extremely taboo in a beyonder gathering. If she were discovered, she would definitely be attacked by all the participants of the gathering. And the host of the gathering often had significant strength. Going too overboard made it easily detectable. I'll just get the £100. If there's another chance, I'll consider how to lock onto her directly. I have to leave this gathering early and smear my blood over Lamino's travels to prevent myself from getting lost. That would be dangerous. Furs repressed her disappointment as she made her final decision. In fact, her actions were already out of line. Hence, she didn't wish to stay another second longer. Hillston Borough, inside a high-class hotel. Klein stood behind an oriel window as he silently took in the crimson moon and thin clouds in the sky. Some time later, he combed the white hair around his temples and reached out to draw the curtains. Then, he went through the hassle of moving the radio transceiver back to the real world and spent the time airing out most of its smell. This time, he only waited about 10 seconds when he felt the room turn dark and eerie. He heard the radio transceiver begin to producing clicking sounds. Klein approached and saw a piece of illusory paper spew out. On the paper were words composed of Loanese. "Great Master, please look right." Right. Klein turned his head in amusement and curiosity to his side. He saw a full-body mirror, which had already turned dark, as though it was smeared with a layer of ink. Just as a thought flashed in his mind, the full-body mirror lit up. Illusory fireworks began shooting inside the mirror as it burst and scattered down in a beautiful and dazzling display. Meanwhile, the full-body mirror produced a line of golden Loanese words. "Welcome back, Great Master. At that moment, although Rhodes didn't produce any sound, Klein had the baffling feeling that it was hysterically shouting. As the fireworks came to an end, the golden text distorted and formed a new line of text. Great Master, your loyal and humble servant Rhodes wishes to ask you how I might be of service to you? Klein was already very accustomed to this as he said in a practiced manner, answer my questions. The golden line of text reformed again. Thank you for your answer. You may ask. Prepared, Klein said. Where did the evil spirit in William Street go to? The full-body mirror's golden text froze for a few seconds before they slowly disappeared. As for the blooming fireworks in the background, they first blurred before a new scene became clear. It was that of an abandoned chapel where withered vines crawled over its walls, and gray stones were strewn everywhere. Klein found it rather familiar. It was where he and Sharon had once conversed with the evil spirit. The scene drew close as Klein saw that in a corner of the collapsed chapel was a tiny pit that wasn't too deep. There were clear signs of it being dug up with one's fingers. Miss Magician mentioned it before. As Klein's thoughts surfaced, the scene produced a cold voice that hid a smile. It's a pleasure working with you. As those words came out of the soil, the scene immediately turned distorted like a water surface being stirred before the scene completely shattered. Pleasure working with you. Who did the evil spirit speak to? To make an angel from the hunter pathway use such a tone, the person opposite it mustn't be someone of a lower level. That person might even be an angel. However, why would he use his hands to dig? He should have a much easier method that didn't waste that much time. The angel is also restricted in a certain sense. Just like that grandpa in Leonard's body. Right, Leonard was in Backland back then. This is a clue. But there are other possibilities. Something at the level of an angel doesn't equate to being an angel. The evil spirit controlled Baronet Pound to contact someone? From the looks of it, the Intis and Faceax spies were just a smokescreen that was deliberately set up by the evil spirit. As expected of a conspirer, thoughts ran through Klein's mind as he said to Rhodes, second question. I have 3 butlers to choose from. Who do you think is the most suitable? Golden Loanese words appeared one after another. If you choose Reback and Walter, there might be an additional development. Asnia is the most professional, but he's also the most ordinary. The 2 who were formerly under the service of Duke Negan and Viscount Conrad do allow for additional development. Klein nodded in thought. It's your turn to ask. At this moment, a bunch of golden text appeared. Great Master, what do you make of me being your butler? As long as you bring me out of the Church of Steam, I can become the best butler in the world. Klein hesitated for a second as he replied, mincing his words. It's not suitable at the moment. The golden text in the full-body mirror darkened instantly before it lit up again, reforming the words. All right. Your loyal and humble servant Rhodes will patiently await the day. Immediately following that, the full-body mirror produced a complicated picture with some footnotes. This is a rune formed with the corresponding symbols and magical labels. Great Master, as long as you are in Backland, writing it on some paper is equivalent to summoning me. A mixture of secrecy and mystery prying symbols. Klein identified the rune and said, Okay. Chapter 741, Butler 9 a.m. Hillston Borough, inside a high-class hotel. Klein picked up a bottle of exquisitely packaged white wine as he handed it over to the elder opposite him. Mr. Asnia, thank you for coming. This is a gift of mine. Please accept it. At the latest, I'll make my decision by tomorrow. When the time comes, I might come and visit you in person. He was using such a euphemistic manner to inform the man that he had failed to be selected. To be frank, he was actually rather pleased with Mr. Asnia. He perfectly met his image of a butler. Stern, well-mannered, professional, a high level of mental understanding, and is good at handling all kinds of thorny issues. As the oldest candidate who lived the furthest away, he had arrived half an hour ahead of time. He had been patiently waiting outside, while Reback and Walter were only 15 minutes early. If not for Rhodes mentioning that the latter 2 allowed for additional developments, Klein felt that he would have chosen this old gentleman. After all, His main goal was to use the butler's social connections to more easily enter high society, so as to make contact with the corresponding targets. The white wine was specially bought from the Intis Srenzo restaurant, costing him £2, since he knew someone was destined to be disappointed while wasting money to travel to and fro by carriage. This could effectively accentuate how generous Dwayne Dantes was, and how gentlemanly he was as a mysterious tycoon. In addition, he didn't think it was right to belittle a butler from a noble family. Such people definitely knew plenty of people in high society, many professional butlers and countless servants due to their past professional experiences. They covered the entire spectrum of people, and they could affect a gentleman's image, and this was a necessary consideration for entering even higher social circles. At present, the 55-year-old Asnia had plenty of white hair. His blue eyes were ingrained with the wisdom that time had given him, so he didn't reject Dwayne Dantes's gift. He received it and glanced at it before bowing. "I love white wine from Garrett. Thank you for your kindness. Your grace is admirable." "Garrett?" "Yes. The waiter yesterday mentioned that it's a brewery in Intis's Champagne province. It's well known for producing high-end grape wine. Some of the wine of certain vintage years are considered top-notch." "Sigh, a butler knows more about wine than me." "That's right." Mr. Asnia had mentioned that wine cellars are directly under the charge of the butler, or a butler assistant among nobles and the rich. "Does this mean that I need to have a wine cellar in the future?" Wine costing £2 is at the bottom of the totem pole, while even Ormer red wine from 1330, which costs £126, isn't even considered the best. How much would such a wine cellar cost? As he thought it over, Klein felt heavy in the chest. He began to suspect that the £2,888 he had set aside from the gold coins weren't going to last long. If not for the training he had during his time as a clown, he definitely would have lost his cool, and not reply with a smile. "Your fondness for it is the greatest form of praise for me. Mr. Asnia, please invite Mr. Reback, who's at the coffee house below up." Asnia didn't hesitate to agree to it. Less than 5 minutes later, Reback knocked on the door and entered the living room. This gentleman had his blonde hair combed neatly. The edges of his eyes and mouth had some wrinkles which weren't too distinct. He had a ruddy complexion and a masculine bearing. It was obvious that he was a butler who could accompany his master hunting or even fend off enemies. After exchanging greetings, Klein invited him in to take a seat while smiling. He went directly to the point. "Forgive me for being honest. I don't understand why you would become the butler of Baron Sindras. Your father was the assistant butler to the Negan family, and your grandfather was the land steward of the same family. Many of your ancestors served the Duke and his relatives until they returned to the arms of God. You should have had such a life trajectory as well." Due to Emperor Rosel's influence, the various countries in the northern continent went from using their fief and aristocratic title to indicate their nobility to just their names and aristocratic titles. Only under special formal occasions would they use the former. Of course, there were a few nobles whose names stemmed from their fiefs. Reback gave a standard smile and answered, "Baron Sindras is a newly promoted noble, an old friend of the late Duke. Therefore, I was sent to his family to help him and his family get accustomed to noble life and grasp the corresponding etiquettes." The late Duke he was talking about was the present Duke Negan's father, the Palace Negan, who had been assassinated the previous year. "Then, why did you leave the Baron's family later?" Klein deliberated and asked. Reback answered honestly. Although Baron Sindras obtained his aristocratic title via the Conservative Party, he is one of the most famous bankers, investors, and enterprise owners in the kingdom. He was one of the earliest multimillionaires, and he had a strong penchant for the new party. He was willing to provide a certain degree of support to them, creating friction between him and the Conservative Party nobles, including the younger Duke. Therefore, to prevent the Baron from being put in a difficult position, I offered to leave. He actually tried to keep me, and he was an excellent employer. Klein nodded and asked, "You believe in the Lord of Storms?" Reback seriously replied, "Yes, the Lord gives us courage, zeal, and a sense of responsibility." Klein asked a few more matters about butlers, and received a detailed response. Then he said with a smile, "Might I trouble you to invite Mr. Walter who's at the coffee house up? After I'm done chatting with him, I'll make the decision. You can wait in the coffee house for about 10 minutes. All right." Rebak didn't harp on the matter, and immediately got up to bow. After bidding farewell, he left in a manner that exuded the air of a military man. As he watched him leave and close the door, Klein sat back down, picked up his black tea, and took a sip. He muttered silently, "If I were to choose him, I'll likely establish certain connections with the present Duke Negan and the Conservative Party. The additional development might include the situation before the assassination." Before long, Walter arrived and entered after knocking on the door. Klein first exchanged some pleasantries before asking, "What conflict did you have with Viscount Conrad's butler? You should understand that I need to understand the situation. I cannot afford to risk offending a noble." Walter had a broad forehead with raven black hair and brown stern eyes. But he wasn't a person who appeared taciturn. He thought for a few seconds and said, "As a butler assistant, I was responsible for the Viscount's children. During this process, due to certain matters, I was appreciated by a particular important figure. As such, I won the recognition of the Viscount, which made the butler wary against me. Later, that important figure passed away due to an accident, and as a result, the Viscount's attitude towards me changed. The butler treated me even worse, making me believe that it was pointless waiting for things to improve. In charge of the Viscount's children, and he got to know an important figure. Talim also got to know Prince Edisac from teaching Viscount Conrad's youngest son. And the prince passed away a few months ago, because of the Great Smog of Backlund. This matches Walter's explanation. From the looks of it, this butler was one of the peripheral victims of that matter. He's rather cautious and professional. He didn't expose his former employer's negatives, or reveal the matter about the prince. Nor did he speak ill of the Viscount's butler. If I select him, the additional development is something to look forward to. Klein listened silently as he made some connections. He then switched to asking some professional questions, expressing his desire to enter high society. After receiving a satisfactory answer, he straightened his clothes, got up and smiled. "Let me introduce myself again. I'll be your employer, Dwayne Dantes." Walter immediately bowed and said, "Sir, how may I be of service?" He kept maintaining a stern, old-fashioned, and unperturbed demeanor, as though these were the professional traits of a butler. "Two matters," Klein replied with a chuckle. "First, help me hand this bottle of white wine to Mr. Rebak who's waiting at the coffee house. Please express my apologies and gratitude to him. Second, hire a solicitor to write up a professional contract that will include you and the other servants." "All right, sir." Walter bowed once again. As Klein handed the white wine over, he asked, "Walter, how many servants do you think I need to hire in order to not appear improper?" While Walter received the bottle of Garrod white wine, he replied without any hesitation, "You should first determine where you will be living. Only then can you know how many servants you actually need." "Oh, do you have suggestions?" "My requirements are simple. I wish to live in Northborough, as I'm a pious believer of the goddess." Klein drew the crimson moon on his chest in passing. "According to the information I read on the papers and magazines, a garden villa in a high-end district has to be at least £3 a week. That makes it £156 a year. Although there are no direct numbers, I can infer that the suburb's best garden villas cost about £2 a week. A high-end apartment with a few rooms and halls would cost about the same. It's been mentioned that that's relatively extravagant, a place where only the richest of the middle class can afford to rent. Yes, from that I can preliminary estimate the rent of a tycoon's house. It's expensive just thinking about it. Back in Tingen, Benson, Melissa, and I spent 13 solely a week on a gardenless terrace house. There was an additional 5 pence for the use of furniture. In the house I lived in Minsk Street, it didn't even reach £1. Sigh, so be it, even if it's £3. I have £2,888. It shouldn't be a problem renting a slightly better one. No problem at all. While awaiting Walter's answer, Klein silently recalled the information regarding rental costs. He began calculating how much he needed to pay every week and every year. Walter considered it for 2 seconds before replying in a serious manner. Sir, you can choose 32 Buckland Street. It's close to St. Samuel Cathedral, and it's a 3-story manor with more than 10 rooms. It comes with a stable, a servant's quarters, and a rather large garden. Living nearby are baronets, House of Commons members of Parliament, and senior lawyers. The interior design is especially tasteful. There are plenty of famous paintings and antiques. All the furniture and wares are enough to accentuate your identity. You can rent it for a year first. If you find it satisfactory, you can consider buying it entirely. Sounds pretty good, Klein asked with a smile. How much is it to rent for a year? Walter sternly and skillfully reported the number. Including the use of furniture, £1,260 a year. Klein was glad that he wasn't drinking any tea, or else he would have spewed it all across his butler's face. He mustered nearly all of a clown's control in order to prevent any abnormalities from showing on his face. Chapter 742. Decided after a brief moment of silence, Klein raised the black tea and took a sip. He said with a smile, "It's something that can be considered, but Emperor Roselle once said to never be in a rush to make a decision. Only after repeated comparison will one receive the best answer. Are there any other options?" Walter, who wore a white glove, replied without any abnormality to his expression. "Phelps Street would also satisfy your request. I recall that Unit 9 is available for rent. It's a 2-story villa with more than 10 rooms. It comes with a stable, the servants' quarters, and a small garden. The furniture and wares are relatively old, but they're considered decent. The annual rent is £220. That's quite a reasonable price." Reasonable. However, Phelps Street means that it's less than 100 meters away from St. Samuel Cathedral. Although this does help in being right under their noses, many of the pedestrians will be nighthawks. It would be very inconvenient for me to leave and return, making it easy to make mistakes. Klein, who originally had a budget of about £160, suddenly felt £220 was a pretty good price after undergoing the catharsis of the garden manor's price. This made him suspect whether butler Walter had deliberately offered him an expensive choice at the very beginning. Klein pondered for a few seconds and said, "Any others?" Walter replied without showing any signs of impatience. 160 Buckland Street is also available for rent. It's a 3-story house which also comes with a garden, a stable, servants' quarters. There are more than 10 rooms, but its location isn't as good as Unit 32. The decorations, furniture, and wares can be considered decent. It has an annual rent of £315. £315. The rental fee flashed past Klein's slightly numb mind. He asked in thought, "What do you suggest?" At that moment, he had already decided on an answer, but as an employer, he wasn't in a rush to express his decision. This was because he would easily be belittled if his decision had a slip-up in common knowledge. Walter seriously thought and said, 160 Buckland Street. In comparison, the neighbors here will be more helpful in entering high society. As for Unit 32, it's overly extravagant. To rent it immediately will make your surrounding neighbors believe that you lack the necessary self-restraint, making it seem inappropriate. To put it simply, to rent a house costing £1,260 a year so easily will make neighbors define me as an ostentatious nouveau riche. To a tycoon who's trying to enter high society, such a reputation will be terrible. Klein sipped his black tea and asked with a smile, "Then why did you offer me the selection of 32 Buckland Street?" Walter unhurriedly bowed and said, "Honorable sir, I'm only a butler. My responsibility isn't to decide, but to present all suitable options and give you certain suggestions for your consideration. In a situation where I'm unaware of your exact preferences, I have to do my best to provide you with all possible options." Very professional. He's likely worried that Dwayne Dantes is a nouveau riche who enjoys flaunting his wealth, so he first gave the choice of 32 Buckland Street as a way to probe me, so as to adjust his suggestions and management style. Klein smiled and said, Let's eliminate Unit 32. We shall choose one of the two. Before I make the decision, I'm accustomed to paying a visit. Let's head off after lunch. Yes, sir. Walter continued wearing that stern, old-fashioned expression. South of the bridge Harvest Church, Emlyn White was wiping the silver candle stands as he was mulling over the clues provided by Miss Magician. A secret beyonder gathering. That's equivalent to providing no clues. It will be rather difficult to pursue the matter. And I won't be able to participate in the gathering in short notice. Emlyn observed himself in the silver stand's surface as he combed his hair. Then, he put down the wiping cloth, retreated to the first pew in the cathedral, and sat down as he watched Bishop Utravsky praying seriously before the altar with his gaze unfocused. Thoughts came to his mind as they occasionally created sparks. Emlyn suddenly grasped a detail. Why would a puppet that garners the primordial moon believers' immense interest happen to appear? Moon puppet. This feels like it's bait. See, could it be a trap designed by Russ Bathory and the others? Emlyn's eyes lit up as he suddenly stood up. Russ Bathory was a sanguine baron who was participating in the hunting competition. He was viewed by Emlyn as his strongest competitor. The more Emlyn thought about it, the more he found it as a possibility. This was because he knew that Bathory was an antique enthusiast, one who especially enjoyed collecting all sorts of strange trinkets from the southern continent. After pacing back and forth a few times, he curled the corners of his lips and chuckled. He silently said, I have no way of entering the Beyonder gathering to seek out the location of Windsor, but I can monitor Russ Bathory and finish off the target before he does. Haha. I look forward to his expression when that happens. Yes, Miss Magician's clue is indeed worth £100. Just as Emlyn was feeling abnormally excited, Father Utravsky ended his prayers, walked over, and looked down at him. He said with a gentle voice, Our piousness is not in our language, but in every detail of our body language. You are not being focused enough today. Wipe the candle stand again. All right, Emlyn replied, suddenly feeling ashamed. After the priest turned to walk to the confessional, he snapped to his senses as he muttered, amused and incensed, I'm not pious at all. I don't have to appear pious. Rows of straight intis parasol trees lined both ends of the street, making the streets appear beautiful and tranquil. With his golden-laid cane in hand, Klein slowly walked out of Unit 160. He silently drew a breath and turned to look at Walter. Tell the owner that I'm very satisfied. I'll temporarily rent it for a year. We might move to a better place later, such as Empress Borough. His words hinted at his ambition to obtain an aristocratic title, as Empress Borough was a place where the nobles gathered. As for why he didn't rent half a year to save on money, it was because such high-end estates only accepted long-term contracts. 1 year was the minimum. To be frank, if money wasn't an issue, Klein had quite a liking for the house. Its lawn was clean, and the garden was beautiful. The furnishing was befitting, and the wares were exquisite. There were plenty of bedrooms, sufficient furniture, and many washrooms on every floor. Even the stables and servants' quarters at the back weren't shoddy work. It was the best residence Klein could have ever imagined in the past. Walter immediately replied, I'll hire a solicitor in a while. Sir, what specific requests do you have regarding servants? Klein strolled underneath the intis parasol trees and smiled. I'd first like to hear your suggestions. Walter thought for a moment before saying, Sir, you will need a housekeeper regardless. During the interview, Klein had mentioned that Dwayne Dantes wasn't married and had no children, nor did he have any mistresses in Backlund. Therefore, he didn't need a lady's maid. Dwayne Dantes nodded gently without expressing any intentions. Walter continued, Her duties would be to manage the female servants and the expenses of the household. Sir, you can't leave everything to me or the same person. Balance is an art in politics, and it's also a good method when managing a household. Emperor Roselle once said that absolute power definitely corrupts. I'm confident in myself before money, but it's only confidence. Very honest. A housekeeper is needed. She'll cost about £30 to £40 a year. Klein nodded. Okay. At that moment, Walter was walking behind Klein to his side. He extended his hand to stop a rental carriage. On the carriage, he continued, I will get the Family Servant Assistance Association to produce a name list for the selection of the housekeeper. You shall choose her personally, and I won't provide any suggestions. Based on the current residential situation, you will also need a steward who can be male or female. You will need a valet, a lady's maid in charge of the bedrooms, and 2 chambermaids who will be in charge of the living room and activity room. 2 footmen to valet guests, a parlor maid, a scullery maid, 2 laundresses and 2 handymen. Apart from those, you will need a cook, 2 gardeners, 2 coachmen or 1 coachman, and an assistant coachman. If necessary, you can have an additional attendant, a steward's boy, a nursery governess, and a second cook. You currently do not have any carriages, but you'll definitely have 2 in the future. A 4-wheeled carriage costs about £300. A 2-wheeled one costs about £100. As he listened to his butler introduce the required servants in detail, Klein's mind went numb. He didn't wish to do the accounts on how much he needed to spend. After all, it was paid on a weekly or monthly basis, and not an annual basis. Ignoring the attendant, steward's boy, nursery governess and second cook, there will be 10 to 11 male servants, and the female servants with the housekeeper will number about 9 to 10. It's basically several times what I calculated. Each week's expenses will exceed £10. This can only be determined after all of them are hired and their salaries are negotiated. There's also the carriage. Klein's mind couldn't help but drift when he saw Walter's mouth moving non-stop. Seeing the staid and extremely dignified Mr. Dwayne Dantes nodding from time to time, Walter subconsciously broadened the topic. In the future, you will also need to rent a manor in the suburbs to entertain friends, to have a wonderful weekend over there. There's no rush. It can wait until you hold several dances and banquets at Unit 160. Sir, do not mention housemaids in front of the neighbors of this street. Only those with salaries below £500 a year will hire housemaids, because they're unable to hire enough female servants to handle the different parts of the household. Klein listened numbly as he reflexively wore a warm smile. Back at the hotel, he watched Walter leave before he sat back down, his expression collapsing. When it was 20 minutes to 3, Klein rubbed his temples and slowly got up. He went into his bedroom and prepared to begin this week's tarot gathering. Chapter 743. A diary page above the gray fog. In the palace with the towering dome. The fool Klein glanced at the sun, who had been pulled up ahead of time, as well as the world who had been conjured in advance. Emanating a little bit of his spirituality, he made contact with the crimson star representing justice, the hanged man, the magician, the moon, and the hermit. Beams of light rose up as relatively blurry figures appeared on the 2 sides of the long bronze table. Justice Audrey, who had just returned from a tree farm leading to the castle, had already changed into a dress. Her sleeves were layered in laces that were filled with lustrous pearls. Like clockwork, she stood up, lifting the corners of her skirt as she curtsied. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." Klein instantly felt better as he nodded with a smile in response. Meanwhile, he couldn't help but sigh. To act like a tycoon costs so much money. I wonder how huge the expenditures are for a noble like Miss Justice. After all the members exchanged greeting nods, he looked at the hermit, as he knew that this pirate admiral would likely provide him with new Roselle diary entries. As he had expected, Catlia spoke out. "Mr. Fool, I only managed to find 1 page of Roselle's diary." "Just 1 page? Shouldn't Queen Mystic be able to produce an entire book anytime she wants?" Klein, who had been met with repeated tribulations recently, remained composed as he nodded. "That won't be a problem." Catlia immediately conjured a yellowish-brown diary page. It then seemed to tear through the spirit world and enter Mr. Fool's hands. Klein deliberately looked down, and he was surprised to discover that the beginning of the diary entry didn't have a date. That means that it's a second page from another diary page. Why didn't Bernadette give me the first page? She should be able to figure out dates. After all, old Neil succeeded. Did she not? Or were the diary pages thrown into a mess, and she wasn't able to restore them to the correct order? Does this mean that Emperor Roselle's belongings were vied for by various factions after his death? Some were lost, and at that time, Bernadette was unable to stop them. Only when she became Queen Mystic did she have the ability to get involved. As Klein guessed, he quickly began reading the content on the piece of paper. How surprising! The fourth epic history divulged by Mr. Dorr is getting more and more interesting. This unlucky bastard who's trapped amidst the storm and lost to the depths of darkness told me that the Black Emperor died once and had revived again. Surprisingly, this matches what was said in that ancient secret organization. Back during that gathering, they said that the 9 secret mausoleums of the Black Emperor weren't all destroyed. Even if this deity who walked the land were to perish, he could resurrect. Even if all 9 mausoleums were destroyed, as long as the order left behind by the Black Emperor remained, he had the ability to strangely resurrect. Only with the birth of a new Black Emperor would he be completely obliterated, never to appear again. According to Mr. Dorr's description, the Black Emperor had 3 stages in the process of his resurrection. First is that the uniqueness leaves the person possessing it, turning into an abstract concept. Second is when the subjects of the Black Emperor hear his mighty voice again. The third is that when fused with the uniqueness, the Black Emperor would reappear in the astral world. The 3 sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics would automatically be returned into the Emperor's hands. This is an order that other true deities are unable to distort or prevent. This way, the sequence 1 Prince of Disorder of this pathway, Blood Emperor, and Night Emperor would be in a rather awkward situation. They might instantly perish, falling back to sequence 2. Mr. Dorr said that back then, the Lord of Storms and the Evernight Goddess had chosen the Night Emperor. They helped him switch to a neighboring pathway, the Judgment Pathway. As such, the Tudor-Trunsoist United Empire fractured, and Blood Emperor Alista Tudor, who was pushed into a corner, made a crazy decision. It was to switch to a non-neighboring Beyonder pathway. He paid the cost of losing his reasoning, becoming a lunatic so as to forcefully advance and become a true god. I have to say that this decision is filled with irrationality. It's almost impossible for it to happen. But Mr. Dorr told me that Alista Tudor eventually succeeded. The craziest true god was born. It's truly fascinating, but Mr. Dorr didn't go into the details since he kept it from me. I asked him which was worse, lunacy or death. He said that it was an obvious choice, death, because as long as one was alive, it wasn't impossible to recover even if one was completely mad. He laughed and gave an example. A crazy true god could use his instinct to mate with all kinds of living beings, giving birth to all kinds of descendants. Through this process, if he was lucky enough, the conflicting Beyonder characteristics would be purged. The lunacy would slowly disappear with time, as he improves bit by bit. Mr. Dorr deliberately didn't say if there would be any remnant problems, nor did he explain why almost no one made such a choice. But I could tell that there was definitely some huge hidden risks. I have to say, Mr. Dorr's understanding of true gods far exceeds my imagination. Before he was exiled, he might have made an attempt to reach sequence 0. It's no wonder he shows such contempt to Zeratul, and he has zero respect for the various true gods. This only makes me more unwilling to let him return to the real world. There's plenty of information. It's no wonder that Bernadette deliberately chose this diary page. Wait, why did she choose this page? What important meaning is there behind it? Did problems begin to slowly happen to Emperor Roselle from that day until he eventually went mad? Mad? Could it be? No way. Roselle's situation back then was similar to Blood Emperor Alista Tudor. His pathway was severed, and the neighboring pathways were blocked by either people or items, making it difficult to reach them. See, could it be that under the immense stress, he made an irrational choice like Blood Emperor, and he had attempted to switch to a non-neighboring pathway? This way, the craziness in his later years was a result of him truly losing his reasoning, not a result of the defamation from others. It's no wonder Bernadette hated and betrayed him, but is also trying to figure out the truth. From this angle, certain things have become very interesting. Roselle forcefully ascended to the throne and declared himself emperor. His declaration of the civil code, using the order from Earth's 18th and 19th century to replace the existing order. He wantonly spread his speeches and promoted his sense of aesthetics. Haha, I really belittled this senior of mine. I always thought he was cosplaying Napoleon or Caesar for his own entertainment. So it was him making preparations to become the Black Emperor. No, I saw a few pages of his diary back then. His thought processes were clear, and his emotions were stable. He could even communicate with various noble women of different ages. He might not have made the final decision back then, but was subconsciously leaving a way out for himself? The civil code probably wasn't deliberate. As a usurper to the throne, declaring new laws is necessary, and from what he could use for reference, the civil code was what matched the situation and flow of history. The actions of him declaring himself emperor later on must be something Bernadette found incomprehensible. She found it difficult to accept. As Roselle's most beloved child, she probably noticed certain abnormalities with her father before he declared himself king. Hence, she chose the longest diary page during that period of the emperor's life to give to Admiral of Stars. Klein couldn't help but make connections, as though the heavy history hidden deep in the fog was being turned over to reveal a page filled with blood and iron. This made him curious about the final trigger that made Roselle go mad. Meanwhile, he also resolved some of his puzzlement. So the resurrection of the Black Emperor is done this way. It's very similar to my previous guess. In the Fourth Epoch, there was actually a Tudor-Trunsoist united empire, which was supported by the 6 deities like the Lord of Storms and the Evernight Goddess. The 2 thrones in the ruins in William Street can be explained then, as it belonged to the United Empire. According to Mr. Dorr, the 6 deities chose the Night Emperor, resulting in the United Empire fracturing. Then, who helped the Blood Emperor capture or kill the 3 Sequence 1 hunters? Among them, Red Angel Medici was likely stronger than the Blood Emperor from back then. Primordial Demonis, Death, Primordial Moon, Dark Side of the Universe, Mother Tree of Desire? Klein tried listing possibilities for his guesses, but he had nowhere to begin. He quickly made the diary disappear as he smiled at the hermit. What's your request? Catlia frankly answered without holding back. Is there someone else apart from Emperor Roselle mentioned in this diary entry? This question made Audrey turn to look at Mr. Fool. Her eyes sparkled as they were filled with curiosity. Even her ears seemed to prick up. Aldra was also very interested in the matter. That person definitely wouldn't be an ordinary person to be mentioned in Emperor Roselle's diary. Klein could guess at their thoughts as he couldn't help but lampoon inwardly. It's only because this diary entry was specially selected by Bernadette. If it were any other entries, I'd have to tell you that the other people mentioned are Demonis A, Demonis B, Hunter A, Hunter B, some aristocratic ma'am, some aristocratic lady. After 2 seconds of consideration, Klein, who was leisurely leaning back into his chair, replied with a smile. Mr. Dorr. Mr. Dorr. To be addressed by Mr. Fool in such a manner, it must be an existence that's close to a god, right? Audrey figured out Mr. Dorr's status from the tone and words used as she obtained an affirmative answer. Catlia and company also had similar ideas, but no one knew who Mr. Dorr was. They looked at each other only to be met with the shaking of heads. Seeing Furs and the other members have a uniform reaction, Klein deliberately looked at the lady and chuckled. You shouldn't be a stranger towards him. Ah, Furs wore a confounded look. She didn't feel like she knew a so-called Mr. Dorr. This person seemed to be of a very high level. Chapter 744. Salem no stranger to Mr. Dorr? Apart from Mr. Fool, the only one I'm no stranger to will be the 7 deities. Furthermore, I've only been to the Cathedral of the God of Steam and Machinery. As Furs was feeling puzzled, she quickly recalled which high-level existence she could have made contact with. Since there weren't many, she quickly eliminated all the other possibilities. Her eyes lit up as she made the connection with the contents of what Mr. Fool had originally said to her. She looked at the end of the bronze table that was enveloped in gray fog. Her voice trembled as she asked, Is he the one who created those ravings during the full moon? Klein chuckled with a nod. That's right. Ravings during the full moon. What's that? Audrey and company exchanged looks, as though they were ordinary people who had just entered the mysterious world. They had never heard of any so-called full moon ravings. As expected, Miss Magician isn't simple. She actually knows about Mr. Door, and she's aware of the corresponding matters. My initial judgment wasn't wrong. Although the beyonder ingredients she needs are relatively low, there are too many possibilities. Katlia nodded her head indiscernibly, planning to ask more about Mr. Door during the free exchange. She was also willing to pay a certain price for it. An existence who could be seriously mentioned by Emperor Roselle and addressed by Mr. Fool in a rather formal manner had to have many secrets involved. It was definitely nothing simple. At that moment, Furs silently exhaled. She felt that she was one step closer to removing her curse. At the very least, I now know who's producing the full moon ravings. She lowered her gaze and sincerely said to Mr. Fool, "Thank you for your reminder." Klein didn't speak further, nor did he point out that Mr. Door was suspected to be the ancestor of the Abraham family Bethel. After surveying around the table, he said with a casual tone, "You may begin." With that said, he immediately controlled the world to say with a hoarse voice, "I have 2 mystical items for sale." 2 mystical items? Mr. World has recently been able to produce something of great value at every gathering. He lives up to being Mr. Fool's blessed. Audrey poignantly sighed in amazement as she cast her eyes towards the other end of the long bronze table. Clearly, she was looking forward to the world's explanation of the powers of the item. Alger was tempted, as he knew that the mystical items the world sold were definitely up to mark. However, thinking back to his lack of savings, with the secret to the primitive island already given to him, all he could do was silently sigh, feeling depressed. He still had 5 hours before arriving at Pasu Island, and he was yearning to immediately fly over and complete his report. Then he could leave the area, find an Obninsk to advance to Ocean Songster. Once he did that, he could explore that primitive island with the world, obtaining the relevant rewards, so as to ease his financial situation. As for Derek, Emlyn, and Furs, although they were somewhat curious about the mystical item, they lacked the desire to actually purchase it. One of them could submit an application to the 6-member council to select one mystical item, which the City of Silver had for becoming a Sequence 6. The other wished to receive the rewards from the hunting competition, and he wasn't certain what the rewards would be. Therefore, blindly purchasing items made it easy for redundancy and wastage to happen. Furthermore, he only had the 2,000 to 3,000 pounds needed for the reward for clues. As for the last one, she didn't even have the money to purchase it. Katlia looked at Gehrman Sparrow with piqued interest, as she considered the possible origins of the mystical item. If it was suitable, without clashing with the 2 mystical items she had, she didn't mind buying it. Seeing how the 2 major clients appeared interested, the world gave a deep chortle. One of them is Scales of Luck. It's what I named it. As he spoke, he requested Mr. Fool to conjure the silver necklace that had an ancient coin dangling from it. After introducing its mystical effects and negative effects, he glanced at Audrey and specially gave a warning. I suggest that beyonders lacking in combat strength don't purchase it. Although it can allow one to avoid a fatal blow, the subsequent backlash is equally dangerous. One needs to have sufficient combat strength and sharp reactions to have a chance of surviving the backlash. Thinking back to how she took on more of a support role, one that leaned towards control and influence, as well as her lack of combat experience, Audrey nodded with slight disappointment. It was an indication that Mr. World was right. Mr. World is pretty nice to me and the Tarot Club members. He's willing to give such a warning. This would have prevented him from selling it. Audrey adjusted her understanding of the world. The hermit found the description extremely familiar. She had apparently heard of the effects of the Scales of Luck. Scenes quickly flashed through her mind, before finally being fixed onto a few particular scenes. Katlia's eyes constricted as she blurted out in surprise, "Senor? It's likely Admiral of Blood Senor's necklace. It looks similar, and the effects are identical. Where did Gehrman Sparrow obtain it? What did he do this time? Did I miss some important news over the past few days while the future was out at sea?" Katlia instinctively suspected that the world had stirred up something massive again. Klein thought about it, and controlled the world to laugh deeply. He's already dead. He wasn't against letting Miss Justice and company realize that Gehrman Sparrow was equivalent to the world. After all, there were already two people who knew, and he didn't plan on using this identity frequently in the future. A powerful member who often took action made the rest of the Tarot Club feel a greater sense of belonging. He's already dead. Gehrman Sr. killed Sr.? In the previous battle, I only held a slight advantage over him. Katlia discovered that she was increasingly unsure of the world's strength. Although Admiral of Blood's bounty was higher than hers, it was mainly because he did more evil deeds. In terms of her strength and mystical items, Katlia was slightly stronger. It wasn't as if she had never had any conflict with Senor. She had held the advantage several times, but she had failed to mortally wound him. As for Gehrman Sparrow, she believed that he was inferior to her when they met on the future. He was even unlikely to defeat Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy in her optimum state. Only when this crazy adventurer completed his advancement and hunted Slaughterer Curtius did she determine that he truly had the strength of a pirate admiral and was someone at her level. However, a week had just passed, and Gehrman Sparrow had completed another hunt. He had finished off Admiral of Blood Sr., who was one of the top 3 pirate admirals. Katlia knew that she herself was incapable of doing so. He's dead? Admiral of Blood Sr. is dead? Gehrman Sparrow did it? He's killing 1 sequence 5 a week? Furthermore, each one of them is stronger than the last. Even if he's Mr. Fool's blessed, isn't such strength too ridiculous? Especially when he hasn't become a demigod. Was it done with the help of the other blessed? The church should have the relevant records. But at my present position, I won't be able to read them. Alger was secretly alarmed as he automatically began to consider a reasonable explanation. Audrey was still in her family castle in Eastchester County. All she read was a few newspapers and magazines that involved the entire nation, so she wasn't aware of what happened at sea. However, from Ma'am Hermit's tone and words, she could tell that Mr. World had done something incredible again. Senor, Mr. Hanged Man had apparently mentioned it before. It's Admiral of Blood's name. Mr. World finished off this pirate admiral and obtained his mystical item? How amazing! That's practically what I dreamt of. Back when I had heard of the 7 pirate admirals, I had imagined myself becoming a powerful beyonder to adventure out into the sea to capture all of them and hand them over to the kingdom. So our tarot club is already this powerful. I have to investigate who killed Admiral of Blood. That way, I'll be able to figure out Mr. World's real identity. But would he be unhappy about that? No, he mentioned it himself, so he's likely willing to let himself be known. Audrey thought in glee. Furs, who needed to read various newspapers to obtain material, instantly recalled a piece of news that she had recently read. Admiral of Blood Sr. was suspected to have been killed by the crazy adventurer, Gehrman Sparrow. See, could it be that Mr. World is the crazy adventurer worth? No. Is the crazy adventurer with a bounty of £50,000. Furs felt respect. She began to believe that he had the ability to help her finish off the Aurora Order Oracle. The suspected traveler, Louis Veen. Emlyn shared similar feelings as Audrey. This was because he seldom read minor newspapers. His area of activity didn't include any information-gathering grounds. As for Derek, he wasn't one bit surprised. He had long confirmed that Mr. World was extremely powerful. Even though Mr. Hanged Man had once mentioned that Admiral of Blood Sr. was very powerful, he believed that Sr. was inferior to Mr. World, due to a lack of any direct impression of him. Katlia said after a few seconds of silence, "How much do you plan on selling it for? Or what item would you like to trade it with? If the price is suitable, I can consider it." Great. There's finally someone who's interested. Klein, who was burdened with immense financial pressure, controlled the world to say, 12,000 gold pounds. He was afraid Katlia would be frightened away by such a price, so he quickly added, "You can choose to pay a portion with gold coins. That way, all you will need is 11,000 pounds. Klein believed that Admiral of Stars, who had plundered gold-carrying ships from various nations, definitely had some gold reserves. Even if she didn't have much, she could exchange for them from other pirates. This would allow him to make his first payment to Miss Messenger. As for fishing up sunken ships, due to the existence of the Church of Storms, Klein believed that any easily discoverable ships would have long been found by the irascible Storm brothers. Sea King isn't weaker than Sea God. And there had to be a handful of people at the level of Sea King inside the Church of Storms. Katlia did a silent calculation and said, £4,000 worth of gold coins and £6,500 in cash. We can close the deal if you are agreeable. The money wasn't easy to raise, even for her. But she had the Moses ascetic order backing her. Spending about £10,000 to obtain the scales of luck was something that no secret organization would object to. As expected of a pirate admiral, unfortunately, I have to avoid the Rose School of Thought, and I can't clean out Admiral of Blood's ship. Klein made the world carefully consider it before saying, deal. Chapter 745. Knowledge is money. Finally. At the instant that they reached a deal, Klein heaved a sigh of relief. He felt the pressure on him significantly decrease. Although Miss Messenger had said that the 10,000 lone gold coins could be paid in installments, and she hadn't specified when it would begin, Klein didn't wish to drag out payment for too long, afraid that he would incur the wrath of Rionette Tinker. After all, she was a spirit world creature at the demigod level. If she really ended up mad, she had the means to make things difficult for her employer, even if she was restricted by the contract. Besides, the cost of acting as a tycoon is just too high. The salary of 20+ servants, and the corresponding costs, is only just a tiny portion. There's still the carriage, horses, wine, gifts for neighbors, banquets, and investments to conceal my status, each of them more expensive than the last. If I don't save up enough cash, I'm afraid I'll go bankrupt and be unable to continue. Sigh, £6,500 with the cash I already have should be able to last until I confirm my target. Right? No, the experiences from the past 2 days have proven to me that I should never use my own understanding to imagine a tycoon's life. I probably still need another £5,000 to £6,000 to barely maintain it. Klein wished to raise his hand to rub his temples, but he ultimately held back. He soothed his mind and made the world look around again before saying with a hoarse laugh, "The second item is biological poison bottle." He used a relatively succinct description to describe the conjured brownish translucent bottle. He emphasized the few poisonous traits it had, how long it took, how to prevent the effects ahead of time, and any negative effects it gave while carrying it. Audrey felt a chill down her spine as she felt a little embarrassed. She felt the former because of the terrifying poison that made one rip off their skin and flesh, while the latter was a result of the strange aphrodisiac effects it had on a wide area. This is truly a crazy mystical item. It's the type that needs to be prepared ahead of time to show its full effects. It's quite useless against an ordinary spectator, because observation and reading minds can help the low-sequence beyonders of this pathway detect the danger ahead of time and make the necessary actions. However, there's no need for me to do so. If I were to detect danger ahead of time, I can directly cry out for my guards. Besides, I don't like such effects. It will easily harm myself. Audrey, you're already a mature and rational beyonder. You can't buy everything you see. Audrey seriously considered it for a few seconds before giving up on asking the price. Seeing Miss Justice not ask for the price, Klein couldn't help but let the world add £5,200. Audrey bit down on her inner lips as she politely shook her head. I wish to obtain a mystical item that's more offensive in nature. Spectator was a pathway that lacked any direct attacks in the early stages. One that was only effective at affecting or controlling their targets. £5,200. Alger, Furs, and Emlyn repeated the price softly in unison before they shirked all thoughts about it. £5,200. Katlia suddenly seemed to recall something as she paused obviously. She then quickly added, "It's not necessary for me." Ma'am Hermit seems to be afraid of something. Audrey acutely read her emotions. For a split second, Katlia felt that the biological poison bottle had a lot of synergy with poison expert Frank Lee. Furthermore, their powers didn't overlap too significantly, and they even complemented one another. She was wondering if she should purchase it for her first mate since he had saved up quite a bit of money, but considering how Frank Lee might come up with terrifying experiments after obtaining the biological poison bottle, she trembled and gave up on the idea. She didn't wish to see the deck of the future produce the children of the crew, the kind that mood. After the gathering is over, I'll write to Miss Sharon and tell her that Admiral of Blood's necklace has been sold. All that's left is the biological poison bottle. Klein hid his disappointment, and after some thought, made the world speak. I have a book of secrets. It's a book on mysticism left behind by the southern continent's shaman King Klarman. It's suitable for mid-sequence beyonders who have pretty good foundations. The price is £1,000. Knowledge is money. Having undergone the teachings of Mr. Fool, Mr. Hanged Man and the other members of the psychology alchemists, Audrey was tempted. She now had an extremely solid foundation in mysticism, and she had a desire to improve further. The psychology alchemists will likely teach me some mysticism knowledge of a higher level in the future, but it will definitely not be all-encompassing, and will be limited to the domain of the mind. Audrey easily convinced herself as she nodded. This is exactly what I want. Furs was equally interested, but the thought of how much money she had made her close her mouth. As for the other members, they didn't lack such knowledge. As expected of Miss Justice, she doesn't bargain at all. My bottom line was actually £800. No, I don't have one at all. It's not like knowledge can only be sold once. Klein happily made the world chuckle. Deal. However, I have to remind you not to pray to the primordial moon. It will make you become a lump of squirming flesh that only knows to wildly mate with different creatures to produce all kinds of children. Of course, you cannot pray to other secret existences. It will be equally dangerous. Audrey was terrified by what she heard, as she couldn't help but change her seating posture. She then calmed down, turning to look at the end of the long bronze table. She said firmly, I'll only pray to Mr. Fool when holding a secret ritual. She had spoken with utmost sincerity, and without any hypocrisy. Miss Justice really worships and trusts the Fool. Klein felt touched and a little ashamed. This was because the sea god Scepter's domain didn't overlap with the primordial moon. He was unable to provide an effective response in certain rituals. All he could do was attempt to use some of the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog as feedback. Following that, as the Fool, he expressed his attitude on the matter. Very good. Meanwhile, having achieved his goal, he made the world say, I have an interrogator beyonder characteristic here, for just £1,200. How many items does he have? Furs was dumbfounded, considering how Zio was still lacking in money, and lacked the corresponding formula. All she could do was retract her gaze, and pretend as though she hadn't heard him. As for the interrogator beyonder characteristic, which was in the hands of Mr. Fool's subordinate, she didn't believe that he would keep it that long for her. Seeing no one respond, the world coughed and said, I'm done. Just as he said that, Alger, who had been waiting all this time, looked at Katlia and said, I wish to know where Obninsk sea monsters that do not belong to the Church of Storms are. Obninsk sea monsters that don't belong to the Church of Storms? The Hanged Man really isn't a member of the Church of Storms? Katlia frowned a little before easing them. I'll help you ask. We'll talk about the price when I have actual clues. All right. Alger silently sighed. A few seconds prevailed before Emlyn said to Furs, I'll pay you the £100 for the clue today. Thank you, Furs said without a delightful expression. Mr. World's transactions were all in the thousands or more. It made her feel a little numb to such a pittance. Emlyn then looked towards Derek. The crystallized roots of the Tree of Elders and supplementary ingredients you need have been acquired. Hand me the list of resources and monsters around the City of Silver, and I'll choose a few items of equal value. Oh, they cost me a total of £2,000. Adding my payment of £200, it will be a total of £2,200. Emlyn only wished to obtain things that he could quickly sell. Otherwise, he wouldn't have much money. All right. Thank you, Mr. Moon. Derek was delighted, for he suddenly felt that Mr. Moon wasn't that irritating after all. He quickly conjured the corresponding list and handed it over to Emlyn. Emlyn casually flipped through the piece of paper and suddenly felt that it wasn't right. This was because just this piece of information had extremely high value. It presented the detailed information and corresponding resources around the city of Silver. I remember that they didn't pay to see this list. Emlyn couldn't help but glance at the hanged man Alger and the hermit Catlia. At that instant, he seemed to understand something. When he looked at the sun again, Emlyn had a newfound sense of superiority, as well as a sense of guilt he couldn't get rid of. He cleared his throat and said, This, also this. Derek seriously memorized what was said, and he indicated that there was no need for him to return to the City of Silver, as those could be gathered around Afternoon Town. Following that, Audrey inquired about clues to the fruit of an illusory chime tree, but she received a disappointing answer. When the transactions came to an end, it didn't need the fool to announce it, as they automatically entered a free exchange. Alger looked towards Little Sun and said, Are you still in Afternoon Town? Yes, but we will be returning to the City of Silver soon. The new expedition team arrived today. Derek not only answered Mr. Hanged Man's question seriously, but he even offered a tidbit. I've already told the chief that while clearing out the Afternoon Town monsters, I obtained the potion formula for notary. The hanged man nodded slightly and said, What was his attitude? He only said very good. Derek carefully recalled what had happened. Alger chuckled when he heard that. You can be at ease. Your chief is very happy to see you grow. In contrast, he will be more wary of the Elder Council's shepherd. He didn't continue on the topic as he informed all the members of a piece of news. Recently, many pirates have been heading to Bansi Harbor. They discovered that it has already been completely destroyed. Even if it's rebuilt, it would take several years. Chapter 746. Same night after hearing the hanged man's description, Klein couldn't help but recall Red Angel Medici and the evil spirit found in the underground ruin. However, he didn't share the discoveries of his exploration this time. Firstly, there wasn't a need to, and secondly, it involved Miss Sharon. As for the other members, they had already learned that Bansi Harbor had been destroyed, and since the hanged man hadn't revealed any new information, there was no need for them to reply to the matter. Realizing that no one was saying anything, Alger glanced at the world before looking back. He said calmly, That's all from me. The hermit immediately turned to look at Furs. Ma'am, what do you know about Mr. Dorr? I can pay for the corresponding piece of information. Furs, who didn't wish to expose her problems, suddenly hesitated when she heard the latter half of the sentence. She was momentarily tempted. Payment. I wonder how much Ma'am Hermit can pay me. I don't really know much about Mr. Dorr either. Furthermore, some of the knowledge stems from Mr. Fool's words. Furs looked to the end of the long bronze table once again and asked, Honorable Mr. Fool, can I tell her? As he met her every full moon, Klein knew that Miss Magician's financial situation wasn't in the best of states, so he smiled with a nod. Yes. Furs silently heaved a sigh of relief, turned to Catlia, and said, £500. You can request for a private exchange. Catlia didn't bargain. After some thought she said, There's no need. Just say it directly. She wished to see if the other members would be able to figure out more about Mr. Dorr from Miss Magician's description. Furs nodded and deliberated over her words. I once obtained a mystical item that helped me traverse the spirit world. But after using it, I would hear strange ravings every full moon or blood moon. It would inflict an excruciating pain upon me that puts me on the verge of losing control. And according to Mr. Fool, these ravings come from Mr. Dorr. She paused and added, He might be asking for help. So Furs has been silently suffering such pain. She usually doesn't show it, acting as though she greatly enjoys life. As Audrey subconsciously pitied her friend, she began wondering how she hadn't discovered anything abnormal about Furs with her spectator powers. Mystical item that can traverse the spirit world. Ravings during the full moon. Suspected to be asking for help. Katlia repeated Miss Magician's key points as she nodded with satisfaction. Thank you for your description. She then swept her gaze at the other members, regretfully realizing that no one else had any additional reaction. The free exchange continued and soon came to an end. Watching the other members leave, and helping them complete a few transactions, Klein returned to the real world as he sat in his reclining chair, feeling relaxed as he rested for a while. Following that, he walked to his desk, and he picked up a pen and paper to write to Sharon. He told her that the scales of luck had been sold, leaving only the biological poison bottle for sale, as well as the lunatic beyonder characteristic. After folding the letter, he wrote the information such as 126 Guard Street, Hillston, and Ma'am Miriam. Then, he opened his iron cigar case, and made Admiral of Blood Senior silently appear beside him. This wraith acted like a valet, as he humbly picked up the letter on the table, before vanishing from the room. A few streets away, a letter appeared out of nowhere in a mailbox as it fell inside. Eastchester County, the Hall family manor. Audrey looked at the mirror with her unfocused green eyes, as the contents of the Book of Secrets filled her mind. This knowledge formed an illusory book that appeared upon being recalled. She could then flip to the corresponding page simply by willing it. This was a result of Klein directly using a portion of the powers from the mysterious space above the gray fog to create a product that was a fusion of information bestowment and the seer's dreamscape ability to recall it. It could last a week or two, and this was sufficient for Audrey to finish reading the Book of Secrets. If she had anything she couldn't recall in the future, she could always request for a bestowment. Mr. Fool's condition seems to be improving, Audrey thought in delight as a twinkle gradually returned to her eyes. She stood up, walked to the door, and said to the bored golden retriever who was sprawled on the ground outside, "Susie, you don't look ladylike enough this way." Susie looked around warily and twitched her nose before saying, "This is the most standard action during hound training. But you aren't a qualified hound." Audrey lampooned as she said with a smile, "I thought you would reply." "Audrey, I'm only a dog," Susie replied in a serious manner. An excessive use of repeated words makes it easy for others to grasp your personal habits and mental gymnastics. "Audrey, that's what that book on psychology wrote." Audrey was momentarily at a loss for words. At that moment, she saw her father, Earl Hall, with his valet and attendant walking up the castle's staircase. Even though it was sunny outside, this place remained dark and gloomy. There were even candle stands that had been lit. They were embedded in the walls as they illuminated the stairs. "This castle is just too old. I think it needs a major renovation," Earl Hall casually grumbled to his daughter. Audrey nodded in a demure manner and said, "Yes, my dear Earl. This is precisely why I dislike this place. It makes me feel like I'm slowly rotting away. But I'm actually spending £13,000 a year to repair this place," Earl Hall said with a regretful chuckle. Audrey glanced at Susie and smiled at her father. "Father, is there something for me?" Earl Hall pointed at the papers in his attendant's hands. A telegram from Backlund. Someone is selling 10% of the Backlund Bike Company. Are you interested? I think this industry has a very bright future, and it's currently far from reaching its lowest estimated prospects. Bike. Audrey found the word rather unfamiliar as her eyes darted around, her expression slightly confused. Earl Hall smiled at his daughter. "It's a kind of machinery with two wheels that allows a person to ride on it. You can understand it as a carriage for the ordinary person. In Lone and Backlund, the majority of the population doesn't mostly comprise of the nobles or businessmen, but the ordinary people who engage in labor work. Next would be the type of people with some technical skill and standing. This is the target audience of the bike. They have absolute numbers, as well as the required ability to purchase it. Even if 10% of them are willing to buy a bike, it will lead to quite a wonderful development for this company. Yes, they hold the corresponding patents." Audrey trusted her father's foresight, and she could understand the prospects as described by him. She nodded gently and said, "How much would the 10% shares cost?" According to preliminary estimates, the Backlund Bike Company is currently valued at £50,000. This is because the product's advertising and sales campaign still needs time to develop further. Therefore, you can't naively believe that the 10% shares are only worth £5,000. I suggest that you bid £8,000 in the first round of bidding, with a bottom line price of £15,000. I will send people to help you in this matter, Earl Hall answered succinctly. About £10,000. I've mostly used up the cash for this month. Clearly a little embarrassed, Audrey said. Father, I won't be able to produce that much money on such short notice. And selling my shares, estate collections, or await their profits will require some time. Earl Hall laughed out loud. There's no need to go through so much hassle. You can mortgage your shares in the Backlund Munitions Corporation, or Pritz Commercial Marine Company, to the bank, for a short period of time to obtain the cash. Once the matter is complete, you can mortgage the shares in the Backlund Bike Company for a longer period of time, using the mortgage loan to pay off the first loan. This way, you'll only need to pay about a week to 2 weeks of relatively high interest to complete the trade. And the bike company's dividends a year would be enough to cover the interest of the long-term loan. You'll then be able to patiently wait for its value be recognized. And that's a high probability event. Although Audrey had never received a complete education in commercial finance, she wasn't too unfamiliar with such matters with a major banker as her father. Some thought had allowed her to understand the entire process, as she asked as a form of confirmation. That's to say, I only need to pay about £200 to £300 to obtain 10% of the bike company's shares? Or lower, Earl Hall said with a smile. Audrey understood her father. As the largest shareholder of the Varvat Bank, as well as the fourth largest shareholder of the Backlund Bank, he had the ability to help his daughter to obtain the most reasonable interest for a short-term loan. Thank you, my dear Earl. Audrey smiled as she curtsied. Under the moonlight, with the dark blue seawater nearing the color of black, Alger Wilson stood at the bow of the ship, as he watched the silent outline of Pasu Island. This was the headquarters of the Church of Storms, a land where a true God's grace was showered. As a middle-ranking member of the church, Alger recalled himself coming here only 3 times. The first was him finding the Blue Avenger, and after advancing to Seafarer. The second was his report last year, and this time, and very long ago, as a mixed blood with dark blue hair, he had been selected to enter the headquarters to be a member of the children's choir. But without any talent in singing, he was soon dismissed. He returned to the chapel on the island, where he was born to be a servant. And the priest there was an extremely violent superior to his subordinates. Every time he recalled that piece of history, his expression would turn extremely livid, fortifying his thirst to become a high-ranking member of the church. Amidst the wind, the Blue Avenger silently cruised forward into the harbor. In Backlund, which had also ushered in the night, Emlyn White, who was dressed in a starched formal suit and top hat, infiltrated the residence of another sanguine baron, Russ Bathory. He believed that Russ would be taking action soon to reel in his bait. And for a sanguine, a night with the crimson moon was very suitable for hunting. After an unknown period of time, Emlyn's eyes suddenly lit up. He saw a figure leap from a window facing the house's rear, before landing silently on the ground. Chapter 747. First Blood under the crimson but gloomy moonlight. Emlyn took out a metal bottle, twisted its lid and downed it. Then, he seemed to transform into a shadow as he drifted over the surface of the wall, quickly and silently following Russ Bathory. Sanguine were always known for their speed. The two barons ran through the sides of the dark alleys and streets, one after another, spending more than half an hour to arrive at the messy and dirty East Borough, where they stopped in front of an old apartment. Seeing Russ Bathory choose to climb the pipe, and using the most stealthy approach to head for the 3rd story, Emlyn slowed down his pace, and didn't rush to follow behind him, as he would be easily discovered. After 2 seconds of serious consideration, he picked up a translucent perfume bottle, twisted it open, and pressed down on it, scattering the liquid inside it onto his body. This potion only had one use: eliminate his smell to make it identical to his surroundings. After putting down the bottle in his hand, Emlyn raised the brass bottle and downed the liquid inside. "A potions professor sure is troublesome," he mumbled, looking down as his hands became transparent. The brass bottle seemed to be floating in front of his sleeve. After Emlyn stuffed the tiny bottle away, all that was left was a formal suit, a top hat, and a pair of leather shoes without any buttons or laces. They formed a human shape as they moved about. Another completely transparent bottle resembling a perfume bottle flew over and floated in midair as it pressed itself, spurting the potion inside onto the clothes. Following that, the suit, top hat, and shoes turned faint and completely disappeared. After completing his invisibility, Emlyn glanced at the apartment where Russ Bathory had entered. He silently climbed a pipe, and he chased after him with extreme speed. While the window was still ajar, he floated inside like a transparent cloud, without causing so much as a stir. He hid in the corner as he watched the thin-faced, but charming Russ Bathory search for the target. The latter slowly frowned since the place was empty. There wasn't even a mosquito, much less a person, despite the former becoming active in the past week. And this sanguine baron had already confirmed that the moon puppet was here. Suddenly, a creaking sound broke the frozen silence. The apartment's main door opened as a woman in a black dress leisurely walked in. When she saw Russ Bathory, she asked with an ethereal voice, "Who are you looking for?" Emlyn looked in the direction of the sound, and he saw a dark-skinned, long-browed face with soft outlines and a drooping mouth. It was none other than his target Windsor. However, in Emlyn's eyes, this primordial moon's devout believer had certain differences from her portrait. He discovered that her eyes, eyebrows, and mouth were curved up, like they were mimicking the crimson moon. And her forehead, cheeks, neck, and every layer of skin that she exposed had patches of withered grass and flowers. Man, what did Russ Bathory sell to her? Why would she become like this? Emlyn jumped in fright as he felt the hair on his back stand up. Meanwhile, withered grass mixed with dried flowers grew from the floor, walls, door, and ceiling in swaths. They began to isolate the room from the outside world, creating an extremely strange scene. Once Russ Bathory caught the smell of danger, he didn't attempt to converse with her. Without any hesitation, he took out a metal bottle and downed the liquid inside. "Pa!" He threw the bottle as his body dragged out after images, as he pounced towards the mutated Windsor. His fingernails extended as they swirled with black gases. The withered grass and dry flowers that were embedded in Windsor's face made her look like a huge doll. She met him at an equally fast speed, clawing at Russ Bathory without any aversion to being injured. Bang! 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 After a series of collisions, Russ Bathory was sent flying back as he slammed into the wall. His sleeves were ripped apart, revealing the bone-deep scratches on his skin. And in the midst of his flesh, the withered grass and dried flowers slowly grew from the inside out. What a monster! This was the first time Emlyn was encountering such an enemy. He huddled in a corner and nearly forgot to help his kinsman. He didn't rashly appear as all kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind. As he observed the battle between Russ Bathory and Windsor, he considered how he should deal with the situation. The strangest of all is the withered grass and dried flowers. Withered grass and dried flowers. They're likely afraid of fire. Emlyn's heart stirred as he immediately abandoned his invisibility, took out another metal bottle, twisted its lid and downed it. He then spewed out all the liquid in his mouth. The grayish-red liquid ignited upon contact with air, extending its scorching flames to the side. The flames stacked upon each other as the fire extended. Instantly, they engulfed the room in a scarlet ocean of fire. Amidst crackling sounds, the withered grass and flowers were ignited one after another, as they rapidly spread the flames to their own kind. In just a few seconds, the sealed environment was on the brink of destruction. As for the grass and flowers on Windsor's body, they were also turning aflame. At this moment, Russ Bathory had a gaping hole dug through his chest, making him lose a great portion of his combat strength. He was relying on the sanguine's extraordinary recovery ability to barely hold up. Seeing his enemy as a flaming torch, Emlyn acutely noticed that her aura was weakening. He didn't hesitate to lunge forward, circle around Windsor, and deliver several clawing swipes. Beneath his feet, Wisps of black gas rose and swirled around the primordial moon believer, like chains that bound her vitality. Bang! 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 Intense and short bursts sounded as the two figures suddenly closed the distance. All movement within the scene had vanished in the end as Emlyn grabbed Windsor's throat with his left hand, raising her up. After hesitating for a second, he saw her hideous appearance and snapped her neck. Pa! A thin miniature wooden puppet embedded with withered grass and dried flowers fell from Windsor's body as the flames in the apartment gradually died out. Emlyn yanked Windsor's mutated head, turned around, and faced the heaving Russ Bathory. He then pressed his free right hand to his chest, and he bowed with a smile. Thank you for your help. Seeing Russ Bathory instantly turn furious and helpless, Emlyn added in great delight, remember to hand over the puppet and the Beyonder characteristic to Lord Nibs. They might be problematic. After saying that, black gases coagulated behind him, turning into two illusory bat wings. With a whoosh, Emlyn flapped these wings as he turned to fly out the window and land in the dark nearby alley. When he landed, he quickly converged the black gases and turned to look around. Seeing that Russ Bathory hadn't followed him, Emlyn heaved a sigh of relief as he pressed his fist to his mouth. As he coughed, he mumbled, I hate fire. I hate smoke. He was just about to leave East Borough when he felt a chill run down his back. Emlyn's mind instantly tensed up as he held onto Windsor's mutated head, slowly turned around, and looked at the shadows in the corner. He first saw a very tiny figure before identifying it. The body was thin and long, akin to a wooden pole. Its eyes and mouth were curved like a crescent, and its surface was embedded with plenty of withered grass and dried flowers. It was none other than the moon puppet from before. It's targeting me. What the hell is this? I'm still very far from where Lord Nibs stays. It's really dangerous outside. Thoughts surfaced in Emlyn's mind as he felt his spine turn cold and his muscles turn tense. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, he suddenly had an idea. He stared at the moon puppet, and he murmured in ancient Hermes, the fool that doesn't belong to this era. The mysterious ruler above the gray fog. The king of yellow and black who wields good luck. Can't a man have some sleep in the middle of the night? Klein sat up as he rubbed his temples in fury. He quickly left his bed, took 4 steps counterclockwise, and he entered the space above the gray fog. He then took his seat that belonged to the fool. It's that fellow, Emlyn White? Klein gave a glance as he curiously emanated his spirituality, touching the crimson star that represented the moon. He then saw a stiffened Emlyn, and he saw the thin, strange puppet looking straight at him. The puppet was cloaked in a rich but illusory crimson moonlight. They were undulating like a tidal wave, making a connection with something high in the sky. At this moment, the crimson moonlight was spreading silently, enveloping Emlyn White within. There's a problem. There's something wrong with this puppet. Klein, who could see more with the gray fog's aid, didn't hesitate to summon the sea god scepter from the junk pile into his hand. The blue gems on the end of the bone scepter lit up one after another, emitting a blinding luster. After chanting Mr. Fool's honorific name and seeking his assistance, Emlyn felt his already cold blood turn colder. It felt like it would slowly freeze into ice. This made his body rapidly turn stiff as he watched the moon puppet stumble and swagger towards him. At this moment, a silver bolt streaked down into the alley, causing all the gloom and darkness to scatter. Pa! The lightning bolts sizzled into a ball of lightning and landed on the moon puppet, drowning it in a swath of silver. The burst of light dissipated immediately, as the strange puppet was left charred black. It lost its decorations as it collapsed. As for Emlyn, his blood no longer froze as it resumed its flow. With him quickly recovering from the stiffness, he knew that Mr. Fool was watching. He hurriedly asked softly, "Do you need know, what can I sacrifice to you?" He always believed that Mr. Fool adhered to the principle of equivalent exchange. Therefore, he believed that he needed to pay a corresponding price for requesting his assistance. After a brief silence, he saw the boundless gray fog and the faint figure behind it. He then heard a lofty and magnificent voice. "That puppet. All right. Emlyn took 2 steps forward, bent down to pick up the puppet, and cleared up the scene before quickly leaving Eastborough. As for Klein, he cautiously used a paper angel to disrupt any divination before returning to the real world. Just as he was planning to head back to bed, he suddenly discovered the moonlight brighten outside, as it seemed stained with blood. Klein walked to the window in puzzlement. When he looked out, he saw that the crescent had turned full at some point in time. It was scarlet red like blood. Another blood moon. Blood moon? Alger Wilson looked up at the sky as he steadily walked into the lightning cathedral ahead of him. This was the place he would be giving his report tomorrow. And in the middle of the island, at the peak of the towering mountain, there was another cathedral named the Chasm of Storm. It was the headquarters of the Church of Storm's headquarters, the holiest of holy temples. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.